So William Beteet comes up a lot in The Madness Continues. He comes up all the time. People talk about him. And even though he hasn't lived in Chicago in probably a year and a half, I frequently get asked about him, what he's up to, what he's doing. He cast a big shadow over the comedy scene while he was here. And it was because he would always show up at Mike's super early. He would be everywhere. He has a big personality. I feel like I'm describing somebody who's like died recently. But he did in the sense that he moved out of the United States. He's away. He's no longer in New York, no longer in Chicago. He's living in France at the moment at the release of this podcast. But I sat down with him for a while. He's a good friend of mine, co-author of the book that we did together, the Power Bible. You can, by the way, find the release list for that in the show notes if you want to join and get the first possible release of that book. James Altucher said it was the best book he read all year. We've been getting nothing but amazing reviews. Bill is a complex guy. He's an interesting guy. He's had a very fascinating life. He's led many different lives. He's done many different things. And a lot of people don't know how to take him or handle him. And I think that's why sometimes they get him wrong. But truthfully, he's one of my best friends. And he really has never said a bad thing about anyone. He loves all kinds of people. He has a big heart. And if you can't see that about him, that's actually on you. And I'm comfortable saying that. He just loves, man. Loves people in the world, wants to embrace them, and he wants to be loved by them, honestly. And I think that everybody knows that about him. They know that he wants to receive love from others, but I don't think they recognize how much he wants to give love to other people too and have them receive it. And he means it, and he means well with all of it. I feel like I have to get that out of the way because this is a long talk I had. I sat down with him before he left in his apartment, and we had a very long conversation that went all kinds of different places. And it was a good one. I'm really excited to have it on here. We had to stop right in the middle of it, I think, because I had to get up and use the bathroom. It was a long talk. So I'm happy to bring it to you guys in this week full of podcasts. Check it out, the conversation with my buddy, William Beteet III. Yeah. Oh. I just love it when you were doing. I think my favorite thing is when you were doing the you were doing the voice. You were like trying to work on your voice, and you every once in a while you would be like, "Oh, hello, Brendan."
Most definitely.
Call you up on the phone. Yeah, let me just. I'm working on my laugh. That is funny.
Yeah, that was an interesting transitionary period.
I think it's funny though because it's like you have that product coming out soon.
Yeah.
Which will link in the show notes. But I'm gonna have to have an affiliate. Give me that affiliate link.
Right. Get a discount using Brendan Lemon's link of $1.
Go to William Beteet / voice course / madness continues.
And what it is interesting though that this would be such a roastable thing if any of the people that we started comedy with still did comedy. Shots fired for all you who quit.
Some of them, they're not listening to this podcast anyway. But some of them are still doing it. Some people are still doing comedy that started in our class.
Most definitely. I think we had the most productive class.
We definitely had a productive crew of people that have been able to crank out a lot. Madness Continues podcast, sitting here with my hetero life partner William Beteet. It's just there was I was when I was back in Chicago, I saw Lancey. And I was talking to Lancey for a minute, and he was kind of, I said, he was like, I forget how you came up in conversation, but you came up in conversation. And as soon as I started talking, I was like, well, Will's doing blah, 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 blah. And then Lancey goes, who had the bet? What was the over-under on how many minutes into the conversation Brendan would talk about Bill?
Oh, that's great. I love that. I love Lancey, man. Lancey's a great man.
He's hilarious, dude.
Yeah. Those headshots looked really good.
Right?
Yeah.
What
And
a pretty man.
well, and those blue eyes we were talking about.
It's crazy.
I wanted to put a baby in him.
Make him a proposition, man. I think he's looking for purpose.
Yeah.
just have it. William Beteet III on the Madness Continues podcast. You're moving to France in 3 weeks.
Yeah, that's happening.
I'm excited for you. I think it's gonna be a good.
Me
It's
too.
gonna be a good situation.
Yeah.
What was it that finally led up to you going over to France?
So it's a 3-part thing. So first was I had started listening to a lot of lectures dealing with Baudrillard per just our discussions about him earlier in the year. And that had gone to Deleuze, Montaigne, Foucault. All these guys were saying things. Jacques Lacan was the one who like really nailed it home. He had wrote something that was identical to something I was working through for my next book on the metaphysics of identity. And these thoughts in this way aren't represented in American philosophy at all. And they're not represented in German philosophy. They're just really not, they're just unique. Yeah. And they're somewhat addressed in Eastern philosophy. But let's be real, Eastern philosophers aren't really philosophers. They'll say some esoteric truism. And then, so that was one of the things.
Take that, Brian Bruya, my philosophy of early China professor.
And
that was such a great class, too.
And then I actually had matched with this French girl, and I had looked up an old tweet of mine because I was going to send it to her. Like, that was like, I'm a American comedian trapped, or I'm a French philosopher trapped in an American comedian's body. So I was having like all these kind of thoughts. And then I hit you up about it. I'm like, man, I really need to learn French and maybe one day live in France because I have so many ideas similar to these guys. And the plan at that point was after the product launch to move to London.
Yeah.
And I was just
we'll talk about your product in a second, too.
Yeah. And I was just going to move to London to get more stage time and honestly just get out of New York and take advantage of this American accent I have.
Yeah.
Tired of all these British guys over here fucking American girls. And I lost that privilege. So every time I go back. And
yeah.
When I told you that, you said, "Hey, Will, I just want to let you know if you move back to London, I feel like you'll be different in a matter of degree, but you won't be different in a matter of kind." And what Brendan meant by that is like, you can put 1,000 horsepower in a Toyota Supra, but that does not make it a Bugatti. And
oh my God, I love that reference, but it just immediately shows you what Bill's tastes are. Yeah, it ain't no motherfucking Bugatti,
right? And it wasn't going to be as challenging of an experience, and so I kind of like I started thinking about it, and then I looked up cost of living.
Yeah,
and it was half of what it is in New York, half of what it is in London, and then I looked at Nice. So the south of France, and I was like, oh my God, it's even cheaper.
Yeah.
And I can just live on the shores and practice. And so I just like booked everything that day.
Yeah, you kind of pulled the trigger quick. It's funny, man, because you and I have a similar, I don't know what to call it. I don't know if it's a disorder or an order, but we have this thing that I think different kinds of people, other people who I interact with don't necessarily have, which is that you and I can kind of languish in what we were calling the
hoop-de-doo.
Hoop-de-doo.
Yeah.
We can languish in the swamp of the hoop-de-doo for a while, which for the listener, you need to understand is a moment where we're like, I don't know if I want to do it. Do I want to do it? I'm not sure if I can do it. Is this what I want to do? But then as soon as you and I have this in common, as soon as we make the decision, this is what I'm going to do, it's like all the action can take place really quickly after it. But it's the getting through the hoop-de-doo. That's the part that is the long time-taking process. So it's like you had been talking about this for a little bit, and then you decided to do it, and that day you were like, bang, 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 and like got all this done.
Yeah, most definitely. It was like, so for me, a lot follows in the mathematics of a decision, right? And I had even talked to you a little bit about it whenever we went to Cannes, and I kind of just looked at prices of places in Nice right afterwards. And so it kind of been floating around, but there wasn't anything that made sense, right? Comedy was more important to me, so it just didn't make sense from that perspective. Another thing was your other podcast endeavor, you interviewing so many European comics.
Yeah, Funny Planet.
Yeah, where they are getting like paid a lot to do comedy in all over Europe, and they don't have the credits I have.
Yeah,
and
that's real. Yeah, that's and the listener, when this comes out, Funny Planet may or may not have launched already, but that's real. That Helgi Steiner Gunnlaugsson and some of the other comedians we're talking to, Ari Eldjarn, other comedians who don't have Scandinavian Nordic names, but like they you can get up. And so, yeah, we were talking about that a bunch. I'm thinking about doing the same thing.
Yeah, I didn't want to burp into the mic. I was trying to be respectful to everyone's ears, but yeah, that was like a huge. That was another thing where it was like, so this can make sense for me comedically. I'm location independent because of these other properties, and and then when the economics lined up, so when it just made economic sense, then it was just like there's really no reason not to do something.
Yeah.
It just felt like more of an inevitability.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times whenever we're at the crossroads of a decision, it is simply that we have either not unearthed enough about ourselves or the decision that we need to make in order to do that.
Yeah.
So what would have been because the first time I was like, oh, like maybe I'll do it in March or something like that. Like it would have before I renewed my lease here, I briefly thought about it. And it just made no sense.
Yeah.
And so over time, just more context built and then made more sense.
Built by here, Bills means New York. Just to be clear with everybody. I think that. So here's why I wanted to bring this up. Also, first of all, I'm very excited for you. I think it's gonna be really amazing.
I mean, it really would not be happening if it wasn't for you. So.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I think that I'm vicariously. I'm jealous, and I think I'm looking forward to vicarious experience because you're gonna be having a great time. And you're going to go, I think also part of what I'm kind of excited about, I don't think I've expressed this to you in these words, is that I'm kind of excited to hear and see what you're going to produce and the thoughts that you're going to have while you're there. So like something that I really value about our friendship is that we'll talk on the phone like almost every day. I mean, we wrote a book together, which will be coming out soon. Yeah, this shit is linked in the show notes. We wrote a book together and, have done a lot of projects. Yeah, we did Edinburgh together. And have worked on a whole bunch of stuff, you know what I mean? And I'm kind of looking forward to seeing when you're in this space, your mind is going to be, and we talked about it, placed in a lot of different situations that are not normal. You're going to be broken out of your normal way of thinking. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the thoughts you have and the things you produce being in that environment. And like for the listener who doesn't know Bill, because this podcast has picked up a lot of listenership lately. I mean, Bill has written more than one novel. You've written screenplays. You've been published in Time Magazine and other places. You for all intents and purposes, you actually are building up a body of work. And I think that this is going to be very interesting to see kind of what comes out of this period of time while you're over there.
I appreciate that a lot. I think that one of the things that's going to be interesting is I think I rely so much on English. It's like a samurai with a katana. Like I spend a lot of time honing my skills for English conversation. And I think without that, it's going to kind of, we talked about this before, lead to kind of a death of self a little bit because I experience myself a lot through just speaking and connecting with people. And I don't think I'm going to be able to do that in the same way. Number one, even as I get better at French, I'm still not going to be able to convey the same type of ideas.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that is going to be an interesting experience.
The average French speaker uses, I think, something like half as many types of half as many words, not in terms of the number of words spoken, but the difference of words spoken. That like most French speakers repeat the same words more often. Than English speakers do, about by half, I think.
Yeah, and also I think it's going to be interesting the kind of learning the French me in a sense, because your identity changes based on how you sound.
Yeah,
it changes what you can represent, and I've always been envious of Frenchmen in their self-esteem. They're not as confident as American guys, but they are unflappable in a sense. In a way in which they really don't have anything to prove. I've dated women who dated French guys, and they're like, "Yeah, so do you want to have sex?" I'm like, I mean, we could.
Yeah.
And
no, thank you. I don't think tonight. I don't think so.
Yeah.
Because you eat the onion for dinner. I just don't think I have a very.
Yeah, and I want to get in that place of just like not proving myself. I want to get that French African dude confidence.
Oh, dude, there are the most confident dudes on the planet are French African dudes.
Yeah, I mean it's because
c'est quoi ça? Qu'est-ce que c'est, mec? I can't even do a good impression. They're it's like the casual listener will be like, French, that's a fucking gay ass language or whatever you're gonna. whatever bullshit ignorant thought you have. But it doesn't sound lame when it's being spoken by a deep fucking voiced Cameroonian man who's the bouncer of a bar. Monsieur, votre idée, s'il vous plaît. Like,
yeah, it's
le carte d'identité.
I mean, I was just sharing with you like some of the French rap that I've been listening to lately, and
It's
I'm like,
scary, dude.
I'm like, this shit goes so hard. Like, I was
It's
like,
all Lil Wayne.
yeah. I mean, like, I was like, we have gangster rap. They got child soldier rap. Like, you know.
Yeah, man, you don't know what it's like in the Côte d'Ivoire.
Yeah, right. But and so that is another thing that I'm really kind of overall pretty excited about. And I also think I am a big advocate of moving a lot in your 20s.
Yeah.
And the main reason is every time you move, you kind of get to let go of parts of your identity that aren't serving you. Like the person I am in New York is just so radically different than the person I was in Chicago.
Yeah.
Who was radically different from the person I was in Malaysia and London.
Yeah.
And then in college. And so I think that there's a lot of times that we allow the context that we're in to speak for us, and we're not even aware of it. And when we were in France last October, I mean, I was so unwilling to adapt. I mean, I was just spent the entire time almost bitching that this place was just not New York.
Yeah.
I was actually the Bill Burr bit where it's like like New Yorkers in LA are the worst. It's like, where can I get a good dollar size of pizza at 3:30 in the fucking morning? Like
that's like almost verbatim what you said.
Yeah.
We're walking around. All right, so the listener needs to understand. We went to MIPCOM last year. MIPCOM was the largest television market on the planet. And Bill and I were both working on TV series, one that I had created, Funny Planet, which you guys have heard about. And Bill worked on Brown Guys Who Fuck, which is a great idea and still could be made one day, maybe.
Yeah.
I think it's great. But basically, in a short description, and correct me if I'm missing anything here, but the short description of the series is basically the stereotype of brown dudes in America and in Western culture is that they're basically asexual dudes. They're essentially they're beta males. And Bill was like, I just want to write a series in which these guys like get laid. Like Bill is basing this on his own experience and experience of Usama Siddiqui, pardon me. And I probably made that mistake I probably made that mistake to him.
That's
What's up, Usama Siddiqui?
Yeah.
He probably just glossed over it. Like I kept calling Tom Thacker Tom Thacker. I was
That's
like,
such a power move. Just a ridiculous, just Tom Thacker.
I was just over there. I was just talking with Tom Thacker over here, and then I
Yeah.
pointed at Tom, and he was like, "What the fuck are you talking about?"
Me and my friend Kevin used to call our history or not PE professor. His name was Garçon, but we used to call him Garçon.
That means boy in French,
Yeah,
by the way.
we're like Garçon, and he was like,
Garçon.
yeah.
Excuse-moi, garçon. So anyway, where I was going with this is that he wanted to make this series where it was basically two brown guys who were sexual subjects in the world, but not just that. Like there was a whole funny script, and you wrote.
But you had influence on. I mean, the reason
some input, with a number of episodes, and they were all good. And so we were both working on these shows, and we went over to a MIPCOM. And here's the thing that the non-French listener needs to understand about France. French people, and this is true of the whole country, kind of casually don't give a shit about anything. They don't give a shit about you. They don't give a shit about what you want. They kind of just casually don't. They're like Mark Manson's, like the living embodiment of one of Mark Manson's like books. And we went out. Bill and I decided to go out to dinner one night in the old city in Cannes, or Cannes, or however you pronounce it. And when we were walking down the street at 8 p.m., it wasn't even that late.
No, it wasn't late at all. And it was a weekend. It was like Sunday night. It wasn't even that bad.
It was like 8 p.m. on a week. I don't even think it was Sunday. I think it was like a Saturday or something. And we're walking around, and every fucking restaurant we went to was closing as we were walking up to it, and they were all like, sorry, dinner, we're done, you can't help you with it, and like that. And we the whole evening we walked up and down, and I think I've never seen you, maybe one time I've ever seen you get more angry.
Yeah, well, it was just like I felt like they were so I get mad when I feel like people are allergic to money. and it was a trying experience. And there were times where Karen and I were out and we're just trying to get food at like 12:30, and we just couldn't find anything.
You couldn't do it.
And
I even remember you saying to people like, I want to give you money.
Yeah.
Don't you understand that I want to give you money? And they were like, we're sorry, we are closing.
So I could not wait to get back to New York because like my bodega has never closed. I mean, I think there's been like 9 feet of snow, and I still got chicken and rice.
You got a great bodega on the Lower East Side.
Oh my God, they're the best, and they got rid of all the really creepy guys. Like, there's a bodega creepiness, but there was like one guy who's super creepy.
Dude, there's a handful of bodegas in this city. Like more than a handful, but there's a bunch of bodegas that you walk in and you're like, I think somebody's been murdered here in the last 24 hours.
Oh, 100%. I mean, A$AP Rocky shot a video at my bodega where they pretend to rob it.
Shut the fuck up. The one around here?
Yeah, the one we go to. I'll show you the music video afterwards.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'll have to link that in the show notes. We're in LES, by the way, I should say to everybody.
Lower East Side. I just tell girls who are visiting me, Soho.
I mean, you're technically south of Houston.
Yeah, I mean, it is super south of Houston. It's like the one block.
Oh my God, my biggest clodhopper moment in New York, and believe me, there's been a lot. But my biggest clodhopper moment was me talking with somebody, and I'm like, I think my buddy's down by Houston Street. People were like, what the fuck? The fuck are you talking about, you moron? And then like somebody was like, honey, it's Houston.
Oh man, she was waiting her entire life to say that.
And she was a drag queen with a huge penis.
Oh,
so it was a very New York moment. It was a very New York moment. A gorgeous drag queen, by the way. She was wonderful, and so was her penis. So okay, here. All right, so let me back way the fuck up for the listener and go back to this, which is you were talking about you're a big fan of you believe in traveling around in your 20s, which I also believe in and agree with, but. What prompted one? I've been trying to record a podcast. We've been trying to, so we record shit all the time.
Yeah, 100%.
But we don't actually sit down and do podcasts very much. And one time, the only other time is the one that we did, The Lazy Philosopher, which is your podcast, which will also link in the show notes.
Yeah, after Trump,
white men built this country.
Well, it's funny because Brexit just happened. Now Brexit is really going to happen, and now it's fitting we record a podcast, a follow up to Trump. This is
oh my God, yeah. Oh man, yeah. That's not my best moment. If you took any individual clip of me on that episode of your show,
my uncle still is very suspicious of you.
That's so funny. I love that you played this for your family, and they're like, Bill, your friend is a racist.
Oh no, they're just fans, and they were just like, yeah, like you really. I'm like, no, he's on the. Do you really think he's on the right side of things? Like,
I got pretty fired up in that episode. I was a scary time.
What was interesting though was your diagnosis. I mean, it's Andrew Yang's campaign is that nobody spoke to half of the goddamn country.
Yeah, and it's amazing to watch the guy riding that wave.
Yeah, so like I think there was a lot of energy that you had there that might have been like but it's just like there's a bunch of people just not being represented in the cultural message of the country.
There you go.
And we expected them to vote against their own interests when they weren't even spoken to.
Oh yeah,
and they were treated as an afterthought.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things, though, that I think, honestly, we get Andrew Yang as a president, Hillary losing is okay.
Yeah, I think I would trade that also. Yang's a great man.
Yeah.
All right, for all you listeners that are furiously typing on your keyboards comments, let's back up before you guys go off the deep end and just continue with this chat here. So what actually was the impetus specifically for this podcast, though, was that I wanted to talk to you about the different movements you've had in your life because, Bill is one of the most eclectic people I know, and you've lived in a lot of different places. I mean, like even when, and it makes sense that identity is such a fascination for you because you're like born in the UK, raised in Hong Kong, what is that? It's like a joke from your act where you're like,
well, I was born in London, raised in Hong Kong, and hit puberty in Texas.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah, and then you have all this family in Malaysia, and your dad's family is in St. Louis, and you've been kind of all over New York, Chicago, Texas, like, and it's funny because when we were talking, I remember thinking, and I brought this up to you, is I was like, I don't think I could actually trade. Like, if somebody asked me to do the general, like, hey, what's Bill's life like, or what was him growing up like, I could give like a normal sketch of it, but I don't think a lot of those. I don't have a lot of those movements down. So what I wanted to talk about on the podcast a little bit was like, your kind of movement through your 20s. You went to school in Baylor. That was where you went to undergrad. But when did you move? And maybe the good way to do this is to talk about when did you originally move to Hong Kong, and then when did you move from Hong Kong to Texas?
Okay, so I moved to from Hong Kong to Texas, or from London to Hong Kong in 1995.
Got it.
And
you were a kid.
A kid. So I was 5 years old. I had a little British accent. I was like a little cutie. And my parents actually looked up whether or not there was any way to keep my British accent, because I had like a refined British accent.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I spoke very proper and everything like that. And just all the speech pathologists they talked to was like, there's no way he's going to lose it, even if I went to the British school.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And so I ended up going to the American school.
Because you're so young.
Yeah, I'm so young. They're like, you're not going to be able to sustain this.
When do accents set?
About 11, 12, 13.
Yeah. Got it.
But even then, like, there's a lot of erosion that happens. So
over time.
Yeah. And also, like, I was like a weak-willed kid, so I probably would have just molded to whatever whatever place I was at, no matter what. Like, no matter how deeply encrusted it was.
Yo, we gonna talk like this.
Yeah. Oh, I tried. And then I moved to Hong Kong. I lived in Hong Kong for 6 years. I watched the handover. I watched all that stuff happen. And Hong Kong was really cool because I went to HKIS, which is one of the best schools in the world. We had like a rock climbing wall, multiple swimming pools, golf course.
Wow.
And it was really interesting because in Hong Kong, it's such a rich place. So it's a very poor and rich place. Like, we talk about wealth disparity in America. It's really not the same compared to wealth disparity in Hong Kong, because it's so compact.
Yeah.
So like, where you have wealth disparity in Ohio, but like, the haves and the have-nots are really kind of separate.
Not in the same. They're not even close to the same location.
Yeah, but
the haves are in Columbus and Cincinnati, and the have-nots are way somewhere else.
Somewhere else, right? But like in Hong Kong, you're kind of tied together in this social net, and everybody, no matter how wealthy they are. So this was the weird thing. So I conflated my dad's company's money because we were expats, so we didn't own our apartment. And we had a nice apartment, but it was basically owned by the company. So I thought we were like richer than my Chinese friends who own their like buildings and shit. But like, I was just like, yeah, but we have a nicer apartment. And I just didn't understand that. And it was interesting because we had like a live-in maid, and that's just part of the culture over there and all of that stuff. And you're with like kids who. Everyone's moving every 2 years, and so you're in a school where people are constantly moving, and their identity is kind of third culture kids.
Yeah, and that's interesting.
It's one of the things that me and Robin Altucher, we really bond on, is because her kids kind of had to go through the same experience where they had to live all these different places.
Yeah, we was talking to them about this.
Yeah, and so you kind of get in this space where the amount of people you can relate to are only people not just that move, but move in a very particular way and have certain types of benefits.
Got it.
Yeah, and then so when we moved,
so you're used to having a shifting landscape of a social circle.
100%. And so I had to make new friends all the time, and especially during the handover, because a lot of American business pulled out of Hong Kong in fear that China was going to basically nationalize a lot of American companies, and so that no one really knew how that was going to go.
Yeah.
And but when I moved to Texas, so we were originally supposed to move to LA.
Oh boy, I shudder to think what that would have been like for you.
I told Clay that, and he was like, man, if you moved to LA, you'd have been a real piece of shit.
Just Professor Hurlbut just talking like it is.
Yeah, but we moved to Texas, and when we moved to Texas, I
gotta tell my little brother to watch his mouth.
Yeah. So we had lived in the suburbs, and my parents wanted me to go to public school, which I honestly, upon all of our reflection, was probably not the best thing for me. And this is gonna sound like just like so like lame, but it was just like a lot of people just couldn't relate to me in this class, and because I wasn't black, I wasn't fucking Indian, and the teachers were like a little bit racist.
Yeah, like you. Okay, so I feel like you have a unique. This is what I feel like. I wish I could relate to this experience a little bit. and it's one of the few things that I feel like gives you. This is why I think you have such a unique perspective. Is that you're biracial, you're dark skinned, you lived in Texas, you grew up in Hong Kong. You had this shifting situation. It almost feels like you occupy a space that doesn't have like a word or a name, or like people can't easily. And we've talked about this before. Like people can't go this label and then put it on you in their head. And I feel like that. I've had this a little bit. So I guess I was wrong when I said I can't relate to it. I've had this a little bit, but obviously I'm a fucking white devil. So Bill just took a drink of water and I just wanted to try to get him to spit it out so bad, but like I'm very white and I'm a white blue-eyed dude. No one interacts with me automatically like that. But if you grow out hair, you're Indian AF. Yeah. And if you if you shave your head, you bick your head, you're black, like straight out. And so it's fascinating for me because you have had to operate in that space where people can't easily put handles on you. And as a consequence, because I think that we've talked about this before, identity is reflexive in two directions, meaning that people treat you a certain way because you to them are you're this person. So we're going to put this label on you in my head and I'm going to treat you like this. And now you behave that way partially because they've already put the identity on you. So I feel like Bill, and I'm sorry if the listener's like, where the fuck is Brennan going with this talking thing? But I feel like this is very interesting because it's like you move to Texas and you occupy this position where it's like you can't be given a role by people around you because they don't know what to give you. So as a result, you have to self-determine your own role in a space in which no role exists. Is that how that was?
100%. And basically what ended up happening is, number one, I think that was a very apt kind of basically representation of what happens. And identity does go two ways. And the problem is that your aesthetic has to match. So a lot of times it doesn't. So I'm a British citizen.
Yeah.
But if I were to just claim that I was British, I get a lot of flack. And because
you don't sound British.
I don't sound British.
And you don't look British.
I don't look British. There is a lot of, but that can't be you, right? So I can't. My aesthetic doesn't match a lot of times my past. And it's harder to do as you get older because as you become more and more dynamic, it's harder to represent all those parts of yourself very rapidly. And a lot of times, and this is an issue I had in the Midwest particularly, was in the Midwest, you double down on how you're similar to people.
Yeah.
And you basically, the first thing you want to do is establish we're of kind. And then maybe later on, you can basically say, you can acknowledge how you guys are different.
Yeah.
But but I didn't know that. When I moved to the Midwest, I thought it was like London or New York, where it's like you double down on how you're different in conversation. But that just, people, when you're a different race of somebody, I think in the modern sense, people just assume lack of cultural context. And
okay.
And so whenever you're doubling down on how you're different, they're only saying, "Oh, you're not in my tribe, though."
Okay, got it.
And I don't think I used to think it was like limited to just race. Somebody once told me that they don't even see me. I've had a lot of people say that they don't experience me as a non-white person. Like they know intellectually I'm black and Indian or I'm not white, but how they experience me is of white due to education or how I talk or cultural references. And
you do talk about the band 311 and Hootley and Blowfish a lot. You do talk about those two bands a lot.
Well, and I think it has a lot to do with actually.
What a stupid joke. All right, sorry, continue.
Yeah, that I was like I'm not white enough for that. But it basically in Texas I tried to identify just solely as black because I realized that Indian just wasn't cool.
They can't. They're also look. Have never spent a lot of time in Texas, but my my intuition would tell me that they probably are not nuanced enough to have a appreciation for any of that.
Well, what ends up happening is that I was also a weirdo. I was a fucking weird kid.
Yeah.
So like I would eat glue. Like
you would eat glue.
Eat glue. Cry during orchestra test. Like because I
like Elmer's glue.
Yeah. Make glue cakes.
What? Why would you do that?
I was just always a weird. Like so. Like it wasn't just I don't want to make it sound like, oh, my classmates were bigoted or anything like that. It was just like I was also weird, so I wasn't helping
you weren't helping yourself.
I wasn't helping myself, and
but it's also but hold on, but it's also you're occupying a space in which there is no ability to interact with you to begin with.
Yeah,
And then it's almost like, I don't know, I wondered this too, because I felt like I kind of occupied a position like this when I was in school and I was younger, where it was like people didn't know quite how to handle you, and so you kind of just did shit and you would just do whatever, and it would weird people out sometimes, but you were just like, I at least I'm getting a reaction from someone.
1,000,000%. I was always kind of like an exhibitionist in a weird way.
Yeah.
And and I had like cul-de-sac friends and things like that we used to play basketball with. And so one of the things I really did about moving to America was that I did have the quintessential American experience. I had a dog. I played basketball in the cul-de-sac. I played roller hockey, all these other things that I learned how to ride a bike, which was very difficult to do in a city like Hong Kong.
Oh yeah, there's probably no space.
And so I got to do a lot of things I wouldn't have been able to do other places. But like one of the problems with me being in public school was just that I'm kind of like retarded. And so
because you're dyslexic,
but also just like in the ways I was talking about, I eat glue. I'm just like a weird person to have, and I kind of needed more attention to basically, and I think I just needed more people to understand me, and that just was not present. And then eventually I went to private school, and then I started doing drugs.
Yeah.
And
what year was this?
So I started going to private school in 2004. So when high school started, and I started doing drugs, I think 2009.
Got it.
Or not 2009, sorry, 2006.
Got it.
So 2 years before I started graduating.
Okay.
And it basically, that was like the first identity that I had that was easily recognizable.
It was like drug guy.
And it was something that it was something I liked. I liked the aesthetic of it. I liked being the guy who got more fucked up than anybody. It was easily understood, and it transcends race, right? Like if you're like that rich kid getting fucked up.
Yeah, because until this point, so this is something that I feel like, because it's like a lot of the things that sometimes we talk about racial issues a lot and stuff, and I think it's fascinating because like part of the reason, just to back up, that I think one of the conversations we continue to come back to is that my experience of race, I think as a white person in America, is different than I think a lot of other white people's experience of race, because I feel like I grew up in a very diverse community in Metro Detroit. I had friends of every, like my, one of my best friends when I was a kid was Kevin Chen, and then my best friend was Sanjeev Boxy when I was 6 years old, who lived across the street from Pakistan, and and I mean, like I had friends from of every religion and every, my first copy of the Quran was given to me by my friend Mustafa Ghulam, like, and I just didn't relate to the same cultural experience that a lot of like white people have. And I think it's interesting because I think that you moving then to Texas are starting to get this like very strange racial narrative thrust upon you, where it's like, this is the identity that you have because this is the identity we can hold on to when talking with you. And that's given to you socially. So it's weird because it's like you're just talking about that being the drug dude transcends race. It's like suddenly you're unburdened of this idea that you have to be essentialized to this person in the eyes of others.
1,000,000%. And I think one of the things that it did also was because no one would really buy into the fact that I was black. So like my whole thing.
Oh, wait, so why not? Just out of curiosity.
Because my hair wasn't short enough.
Got it.
And so and I just, when I was younger, I just had my Indian features were more pronounced than my black features.
Got it.
And so no one was buying into that. And I was just kind of like a gamer nerd and stuff like that. And so like when
kicking ass on WoW.
Yeah, I rated Endgame on World of Warcraft, rated Endgame Star Wars Galaxies, and I really identified with doing well in school. But like drugs superseded all of that and kind of just gave me a clear-cut way to experience myself and kind of bring value to a situation in a way in which I honestly feel like I was destined to always do. I always felt I just knew I was always going to do drugs. Even when I was a fucking nerd, super nerd, I just knew that there was something that really attracted me to them, and I just loved it, and I loved being bad in that way. So I overdosed in the transitional year between junior and senior year. I overdosed at Six Flags, just a whole ordeal. I was 107 pounds. And
You were 107 pounds.
107 pounds.
What do you weigh now?
Probably like 165.
Wow.
So I was like a lot. I was just rail thin. My whole senior year was a goddamn mess. Because I was just dealing with the fallout of all these emotions and getting drug tested all the time, and school wanting to like kick me out because they had heard rumors, and some of the rumors I just had started about myself that weren't even real, but I was like
really
pathological liar.
Yeah.
And
why? Okay, so why? What was the impetus behind that? Do you think?
Being a pathological liar.
Yeah, or starting rumors about yourself.
Well, so the one that I wanted to be, I really loved rap, and I actually had this very harsh criticism of rap for a very long time because I felt like rap brainwashed me in a sense to want a life that number one, it was just not my cultural experience, but I wanted that to be.
Got it.
So I was trying to buy an AK-47, like I was
in Texas. That doesn't sound too weird.
But I was just illegally, and just to have it in my car. I wanted to be like, I wanted to be a kingpin kind of like energy.
Yeah.
And so this was over time when it was just all coming to a head senior year, and that's why I didn't go to college outside of state. I didn't go to UCLA or Boston College because I was just fucking up my life so readily all the time. And so I went to Baylor, which is where my sister went. And my younger sister went there after I went there too.
So you didn't go out of state. Was it because
I just had my dad basically was like, you do not know how to say no to a good time. And he said a big city will eat you alive. And he was 1,000,000% right. And that's because Waco almost ate me alive. And
Got it.
I started just when I was at Baylor, just, went hard into like drugs again and all this other stuff. And really, it was just like 2 years of that, just that being going to class messed up, all these other things.
You would go to class messed up?
Oh yeah,
I just can't. That's amazing, man.
And because it was normalized in my group of friends.
Got it.
So like I was a complete degenerate.
Yeah. So this is what you built your identity around.
100%. And when I quit, I had to deal with this reckoning that I wasn't good at anything.
Okay.
And that was horrifying. Because here's the thing is like drugs had insulated me from, most people don't realize this. People think their identity, or how we talk about identity in the modern sense, is things that you had nothing to do with. So things you were born into, your race.
Immutable characteristics.
Immutable characteristics or preferences.
Sure.
What I think more so has to do with your identity is skills. I think skills are where we derive value to society a lot of times. And so when we're going through existential crises and we're like, oh my God, I'm a fraud, it's usually you're just not good enough at whatever you want to be
doing.
Good.
Yeah.
And
well, there's something to that because Jamie Foxx even talks about this, where he says that music became this gateway to connect with other people because he was like, I wasn't black, I was a talented musician.
Exactly.
And there's something about that where it's like it begins to transcend these immutable absent and this I think is almost, it's not unique to America, but it feels like I don't feel pressure living outside of the United States that I do with this inside the United States, which is that outside of anything else, that's how people will treat you here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very weird, I think.
Yeah, race identity trumps national identity. And we talked about this, that one of the things I'm looking forward to is that race is not even in part of the French Constitution. It's banned from it because they believe you're French first.
Yeah.
And everyone identifies as being French. And I really, I've talked to you about this, that I grew up my entire life thinking I had been oppressed. Meanwhile, realizing the thought of me thinking I was oppressed was oppressive, and it kept me from taking responsibility for my own actions. And like there, to an extent, do I feel like, is there sometimes more prejudice or more friction in certain situations? Yeah, but that also, I can't, like, I used to think Chicago was just like this like racist, disgusting town that's completely irredeemable, and in the way in which it made me feel. But these were the kind of the experience. I moved from London to Chicago, And when I was number one, London is a big melting pot, but also I was an American over there, so I had an American accent. I was going to a really cool school. I was taking courses at the London School of Economics. So I was like in this cool place in my life, and I was having a lot of success with women. But a lot of that, honestly, I didn't want to be honest with myself. A lot of it was probably just because I had an American accent and I was in this cool stage of my life.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, when I was in Chicago, I was kind of in law school. I wasn't in the best law school in the city, not the worst, but not the best. When I was there, I was just normal, and I just didn't have good fashion. I lacked social acuity. But
it was just also the Midwest is just a different culture.
It's a different culture, but I didn't take responsibility for it because I just wrote it off as racism, right? And like, come to find out that a lot of transplants, even if they're white, experience the same thing of what I was experiencing in Chicago, of people being cold and having a difficult time of breaking into friend groups. And
which is funny because the Midwest is so known for being friendly.
Yeah,
but it's like it is like cold and weird, kind of.
Well,
people in the Midwest hang out with their families mostly.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing, is that a lot of the things that I am don't have currency in a lot. Like, so like I would have this issue where I'd be dating a girl, and like I've had a lot of girls say, I don't know how to describe you to people, and I don't, like, they're like, he's a lawyer-ish, like, you know, he's a comedian-ish. Just everything is just They
want to have like one statement.
You want to.
Oh yeah, he's a lawyer and he went to Iowa.
Yeah, and so when you kind of,
he's in finance. He went to Indiana.
Yeah, and so like that was kind of like an interesting experience. But when I was in college, and I realized that I wasn't good at anything, that was just like kind of like the first, like, I need to get my life together moment. And I started doing like a lot of community service. A lot of it was also trying to get laid, like, you know, which is, I think what's the interesting thing about being a guy is if you figure it out really young, you fuck up your life. Like every guy I know who was getting like mad ass, like
when he was in his like
20,
17 to 20.
Yeah, he's just they're just shitty.
They peaked.
Yeah, and like the thing is because a lot of it was context based. A lot of it they don't know why it happened, and so it's like, you know, it just was, and they over identified with that moment, or they become alcoholics because they're like, well, when I got drunk around.
It used to work.
Yeah, and
or they're getting Me Too'd now.
Yeah, and just from
too.
Fucking, yeah, like, you know. And so like for me, it was just kind of like this cultural odyssey of like having to let go of drugs to get what I really wanted, which was to go to law school, which was to develop skills, which was to connect with women, and all those things kind of did happen. But like by the time I graduated, Baylor, I had you know, I was like a philosophy club leader. I was like in newspapers for like.
So when did you stop doing drugs?
So there was like a soft stop and a hard stop.
Sure.
So it was like I want to say 2011.
Okay.
And
that was the soft stop.
Yeah.
Or was that the hard stop?
The soft stop, and then I went back like 6 months later, but then I stopped hard, and I would only do psychedelics.
Got it. And when did you move from Texas to London?
So I moved from Texas to Malaysia, and I lived in Malaysia for a year. To help
in 2011.
2012.
Okay, got it.
And to help my dying grandmother, and to start a business with my friend Jay and live rent free, and kind of just get
Juvie and Jay Hernandez.
Juvie and Jay, yeah. We started an application called My Opinion. The company is called Story Tapestry, and that whole process gave me a lot of purpose, and it was the first time I actually had really, you know, it was an utter failure from the beginning. Like, it was going to fail. We had poured in all our graduation money, but one of the things that I think was really powerful in that was that we took ourselves seriously.
Yeah.
And it was the first time I had taken myself seriously.
And really tried to do something.
Exactly. And through that process, you know, I just didn't have the skills to come through with a lot of it, but it really just it made me respect myself, to be honest. And being in Malaysia allowed me separation from a lot of my friends' anxieties on just getting a job right away, and really connecting with my family during that time. And honestly, you know, when you're separated from being validated through conversations, you kind of look back and like, oh, I'm responsible for the situation I was in because I got rejected by every law school I'd applied to.
Whoa.
Which was 100%. I mean, I was a drug addict for 2 years. Like, I had a 0.4 GPA my first year of college.
Jesus,
like,
Bill.
Like, I was like, you know, or first semester.
It's so crazy it's just crazy for me to think about that, because I think that the guy I know you as now is like you completed this masterclass course, which took you a fucking year.
Yeah.
And while you were doing it, we wrote a goddamn book.
Yeah.
And it's like, you were so driven when I met you in Chicago, and just have been since. But like when we met in Chicago, you were doing the most open mics of anybody in a week. I think you did like 30 or something.
Yeah.
Some insane number of open mics. And then I started doing the nonstop comedy every day. I was like, I'm going to do 100 days. And then you were like, fuck it, I'm going to do it a whole year. And then you just did it a whole year.
Yeah.
Then you gave a TED talk on it.
Well, it's crazy now. Clay has the record of 800 something days straight.
Yeah, he's doing it on the L.
Yeah.
Like, it's just madness. But like, the point of me bringing that up is like, I can't even conceive of like you not being driven in a way.
Yeah, all that happened in Malaysia. So that big tonal shift happened. I used to document how I used every hour of the day. I had Excel spreadsheets.
Yeah,
and
that doesn't sound unhealthy.
No, it became super because I became really neurotic. So at the last 5 minutes of every hour, I would document how long time I took to poop, like how I actually spent all the time. And I would grade it green, yellow, red. Then at the end of the week, I would analyze like the trends, and because I was trying to overcorrect, like the Hegelian dialectic.
Yeah, you were like, I fucked up for this much. Now I'm gonna come back and have to. But these are things that. But it's funny because these are things that regular people know intuitively, because they haven't had to. They didn't go so far into vice that they have to now, like you said, overcorrect into virtue.
Yeah. 100%.
So you're like you're on a search at this point in time to be like, what am I really, like, how am I really, you're trying to just understand your life by gathering data and then trying to move it in a good direction.
Exactly. Just trying to do anything that sounded like a good idea. And I was really inspired by one of my professors, Dr. Markham, who was a Harvard professor, like doctor, triple PhD. And he used to wake up at 3:30 in the morning. So I moved back how early I woke up every week until I got to 3:30 in the morning. So when I was living in London, I was waking up at 3:30 morning, going for an hour-long run, then working on my books, and then going to the gym because gyms don't open there till 6 a.m. And then after that, working on class studies, doing all this other stuff. I was part of all these different communities, and I really didn't party. I really didn't actually like live when I was in London because I was so focused on basically becoming an exemplar of discipline. And I got down to 5% body fat, cook all my meals at the beginning of the week, and it really kind of just really sharpened my character. And the reason I got to study out there was just because my mom had found a course study thing that I could just get, like that didn't have any admissions requirements, but I was taking courses at the London School of Economics. And so it was basically, and I was at a point where I was like, do I want to go to law school or do I want to study finance? And just get a master's in finance, be a banker, and that. But I just, number one,
I can't. You would be so bored.
Yeah, I don't have the same kind of financial literacy. I could do it, and I think that the courses I took changed fundamentally how I look at the world, and I really appreciate those courses. But yeah, I was just like, oh. When I got into Syracuse and then Kent, I was just like, oh, I'm definitely want to become an attorney. Fuck this noise, and so then Jay and I went backpacking through Europe, which completely kind of changed me.
So was Jay with you in Malaysia?
No. So he wasn't. We did all this through Skype, and stuff like that. I just was in Malaysia because it was a place I could live rent free. It was just somewhere to be close. I was never going to get another point in my life to be able to be close to that part of my family for that period of time.
Got it.
And it was like a really important time because like my grandmother was dying of Alzheimer's, and so like I had to carry her and like help put like adhesive on her wounds and stuff with my aunts, who everybody was just working around the clock in her last moments alive and stuff. And really it just really, you have to take time to forge bonds with people. My parents made the very calculated decisions that they realized very early on that I could live my life and not actually be close to any of my family because we were expats.
Yeah.
And so I would stay with family like for like really long periods of time to forge these bonds when I'm young. That way I would always have them, and that has just deeply played out. I'm very close to all my family. But when I was in Malaysia, that was kind of the thing, was just like, oh, like, it was just a place to start over and not just be thrust in the thicket of, because this is the thing, this is how narrow-minded my self-concept was. I was just like, oh, I just want to get a job in Houston. I want to live in Texas. Like, I couldn't even imagine.
Conceive of a world outside of that.
Yeah, because you know you get so caught in that think tank of things, and like
because that's where I think I've said zeitgeist more than once on this podcast now, but that's where like the cultural momentum in that area goes to.
Yeah, 100%.
You think about that, you can see this in the Midwest, you can see this in Chicago, you can see it in New York. Like
yeah,
it's
100%.
you get involved in a community of people, and they're like, yeah, we need to do these things, and you're following the kind of flow of the unconscious river of life.
100%. And like in the book that I'm working on about the metaphysics of identity, the Holocron, I talk about the cultural trance that you get sucked into, the cultural story that you're borrowing thoughts from your community, not yourself. And it's important to be able to label that in the anatomy of your decision-making process, like, oh, this is the culture, a cultural yearning, right? This isn't me, but sometimes those voices scream so loudly we conflate them with ourselves. And so when I was in Malaysia, it allowed me to kind of detach from that. And but yeah, when I moved to Chicago from London, which I would say was difficult because number one, I went to Chicago Kent grade school. It was like ranked like 60 whenever I went there. I had a scholarship because I'd done well in the LSAT. But I wanted to be a professor. I wanted to be a legal professor.
Got it.
And not because I loved the law, but because I've always wanted to be known as somebody who was intelligent. Like that was my main.
This was what you were seeking to actually satisfy.
Exactly. I wanted to be somebody who, without explanation, had people assume that they were competent, and there was no greater way to do that than to get like a Harvard JD or Yale JD. So do you have to go to the bathroom?
1 second. Okay. Sorry about that. I had to grab a beer. I had finished my other beer, and we're like 45 minutes in, and I was like, yeah, hold on, Bill, I need to go get another one. You were on a roll, too, so I didn't want to, I felt bad because I didn't want to stop you, but I had wanted one for a minute. Because I don't know if you guys have ever talked to Bill, but you need a drink. Bill is, by the way, drinking out of is that a gallon?
Yeah.
It's a gallon of water jug.
Yeah.
It's just... It sits in the center of your...
And you know me, I haven't washed the lid, like, ever. I've actually thought about it, like, that might be what kills me one day. Like, how did Bill die? Oh, you know that jug of water?
You know that giant jug of water, man? Yeah, dude, it grew a fungus on it that science has never seen before. You know what's ironic is after killing Bill, it's actually being used to cure cancer. They're calling it the Beteet fungus. Beteetophilus.
That's great.
Okay, so here's the other thing I gotta. All right, we're gonna get back into talking about how you went to law school in order to try to feel like a smart guy, but
yeah.
But I want to say this real quick: is Bill's apartment, which you're soon going to be leaving. I've stayed at many times, as well as many other Chicago comics who have come through here. I'm thinking Luke and Skylar and St. James and Nick and Josh and who else has stayed here? Anybody? Am I missing anybody else?
A lot of people.
Yeah, a whole lot of people have stayed here. Bunch of Harvard grad girls. Anyway, Bill's apartment, I was walking up and I kind of had this like nostalgic moment where I was like, man, for the past few years, Bill's lived here, and like I've been here so many times, and he's gonna be moving to France. I'm probably not gonna be coming back to this apartment. But one of the funny things about this apartment is when you first moved in, you had like nothing.
Yeah.
Like there was like nothing here. And I had without going into too many details for the listener, I kind of had like a total meltdown once when I was staying here with you. And you had like no food. Not only did you have no food, you had no ability to eat food here. There was no plates, there was no silverware, there was no thing to cook food. So we go to like the store, and I love this. We go to Whole Foods, and I'm like, and Bill's like, what should I buy? What kind of food should I buy? And I'm like, dude, here's a list. I like gave you a list of shit. And I'm like, get some like pasta, get some like this stuff, get some olive oil. And then Bill comes back from the store, and he's got olive oil, but it's like a spray can of olive oil.
Yeah, well, it's what you're supposed to use on a cut.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah. But instead, I'm like, Bill, I can't cook anything with this. And you were like, yeah, let's just go out.
Yeah, the bodega's been good to us.
I can't believe that A$AP Rocky shot something there. Okay, so let's get back to the point. Sorry, everybody, for that reset and that stupid story that I thought was going to be funny about the olive oil. Olive oil is a word that is difficult to say when you've been drinking. Let's talk about the olive oil. The olive oil. Okay, so let's get back to it. So you wanted to be a professor, and it was basically, but it was to fulfill this kind of impulse that you had of being like, I want to be the smart kid.
1,000,000%. I just wanted. I've had a lot of people. I've expressed this as an insecurity to you. I have a lot of times where I feel like people assume that I'm stupid, partially because I'm dyslexic and I've had trouble like reading.
Yeah.
It like out loud, and so I've always been at this like weird, like how I just always wanted to be validated for that.
Sure.
And I felt like that would have been kind of a crowning achievement and kind of like a big thing where a lot of people would be like, oh my God, Will's really turned his life around. Kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been.
Yeah.
So it's those would have been accurate narratives.
Yeah, 100%. And so what ended up happening though, my first year of law school, I just I woke up at 3:30 in the morning, would go to class. But I was kind of a fucking weirdo though, like in my school.
So what year was this when you got into Kent?
2014.
Got it. Okay.
And I was just kind of a fucking weirdo, and like I made friends, but I was just kind of like off, and I did good. Like my first year, I did really well. My first semester, I think I was in the top 25% of my class when all first grades came out. And then, but I was also like a dating coach online and, and like coaching men like in the Millennium Park and shit. Like,
did you really? Did you actually meet up in the Millennium Park and coach dudes? That's great.
I was a writer for like Girls Chase, and I was writing a serialized novel. I was just doing a lot of things, and I was like preparing. I was a power lifter. I was driving like I was like driving obscure states.
So this is what I'm talking about. Is like I just think like you're doing all of this shit at the same time.
Yeah, and also I had done, even though I don't claim this is my start, I had done like an open mic. And
when did you do your first open mic? And before that, let's talk about that. But then let's go into and why, how you got into wanting to do that.
So my first open mic I ever did was in Austin, Texas, but I did at some coffee shop. And then I didn't do it for like a really long time, but I wanted to do it in London. I just didn't have. It was just like I was writing novels, like
yeah.
And then when I got to Chicago, I did the Atomic open mic, the Atomic Comic open mic.
Atomic Comic?
The Atomic Comic. This was like, I want to say 2015.
Yeah.
Like March 2015 or something like that.
Got it. And where I haven't even heard of that one.
Yeah, it was the last night it was going or whatever.
You destroyed it. They had to close it after you.
Well, no, this is the fucked up thing. I showed up. I completely forgot this. I showed up to the mic, and I waited for like 45 people, and then they bumped me to let some nigga who'd never done comedy before go, and I was like, I've really like never done comedy. And
that man's name was Hannibal Buress.
Right. And then so the first mic I did in Chicago is Reed's.
Reed's local.
Yeah, and it was a Brian Tracy thing, kind of like I was just like I was just like one of those like I'm gonna like really just do it, and but like the real and then I bombed, and then I was just like I'm never doing that again.
That's so funny, man. Wait, so the Atomic Comic, hold on a second, where was that? Did that even take place?
It was at some theater that I think they do magic there now.
It was in Boys Town
comic?
or something?
Who's the comic? She has red hair. She has like an Amazon thing in the Chicago scene. She's not really in the scene, but she's like definitely a comic.
I don't know. Red hair. I feel like I should know this.
Yeah.
Oh wait, is she burlesque? She's a burlesque dancer?
I don't know, but she's just like in a comedy. Like she was never really part of the scene, but like she was around.
Got it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, anyway. Yeah. Well, so anyway, she used to run this thing.
Yeah. And one of the things that I had a hard time. So when I told this story a lot of times where I masturbated on a plane. And that's how I started.
Yeah.
That's actually true. So I did like one open mic at Reed's, maybe two, then vowed never to do it again and focus solely on just writing. And
wow.
And because I got rejected by the schools I had applied to.
What was your material that when you went up at Reed's, just out of curiosity?
One of the jokes was with all this Ebola going around, I got to stop letting my girlfriend throw up on me after we have sex.
Oh my God, man. This is wow. Okay. Oh, wow. This is like a triple threat of a joke.
Yeah.
You've got international health crisis.
Yeah.
You've got vomit, and you've got Bill's fucking.
Yeah, and then I really can't remember anything else besides that.
Yeah.
But when I had gotten back, so after
with that headline, I don't know how you'd beat it.
but when I had gone to Malaysia and come back,
Yeah.
and I had masturbated on a plane. This was just over a summer. I was supposed to do an internship that completely fell through. I just ended up spending a summer in Malaysia.
Yeah.
With family, and kind of just dealing with this was kind of a thing that fucked me up was so my friend Selma, who is a genius and really smart, she got into Harvard through transfer. And she messaged me. She's like, "Hey, you got to come visit me in Cambridge." I was like, "Oh my God, you got into Harvard!" And like, I had this reverse Schadenfreude, also known as jealousy.
Reverse. So Bill, okay, so weeks ago, we're having this conversation, and Bill's like, "Man, you know that thing that you get when you're happy that someone else failed?" And I'm like, "Yeah, Schadenfreude." And he's like, "Yeah, man, what's like the reverse of that?
Yeah,
where they have something and you're angry."
And
I'm like, yeah, I think that's called jealousy, dude.
Yeah. It was kind of a moment of reflection where I was like, well, you just didn't want that because all your actions just showed the opposite. You just, I stopped reading cases. I just did enough to do well. And
so you're still in law school, and suddenly you got this feeling of like, yeah, I don't want this.
No, it didn't come up audibly like that. It was just like all the other things that
suddenly the wind was out of your sails.
Yeah, well, it wasn't. It was just that I was in other places. Like I was just
got it. Okay,
and I really wanted to just be known as a writer, like a novelist or a writer.
Yeah.
And I was working on this book that we've read to each other gaily earlier this year in this apartment.
Yeah, it was really pretty gay.
We read academic drug addict.
That's how I know I'm not gay. Actually,
yeah.
Is because we would have been dating.
Yeah.
After that. Bill and I sat down in this apartment and we were like, you know how we both wrote novels? Do you want to read them to each other?
This was after me not connecting with Braveheart.
Yeah, we tried to watch Braveheart and he didn't do it.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, man, let me clean your semen off of my chest and I'll go open my novel.
Yeah, so those were kind of like the main things that I was like really focused on. But when I had come, so this was kind of crazy, and this is just relevant because we just came from his party, was the first exposure I had to James was when I had like dysentery in Malaysia.
Jesus.
And I wanted to die because I was like shitting until I was like dehydrated.
Yeah,
and
it was the worst.
Yeah, and James is the number one thing that came up on Google when I Googled that. And
are you serious?
Yeah.
That is so funny.
Still number 3. Like the suicide hotline, like Google had to move him down on the algorithm because of people complaining. And
what was the article? What was what did he write?
But it was about him thinking about committing suicide, I think, after he lost his money. But I was like, this guy's pretty cool. Let me buy his audio.
This is James Altucher. Yeah.
Yeah. Who's writing the foreword to our book?
Yeah, he's
which
an
is
amazing
crazy.
man.
So
and just so the listeners are aware, I also had dysentery, except I was in the south of France when I got it. I was in Marseille.
It's actually the word. Like when you really like, I could shit myself to death. Like and it's so funny because you're like, it's a thought that you would never have cross your mind until you shit that much, where you're like,
there's nothing left in my body.
Yeah,
how am I not shitting an organ right now? There's my fucking gallbladder has got to be coming out of my asshole right now.
It's the absolute worst, and I like crawling, and I'm listening to his book Choose Yourself, and it really,
as you're dying on the toilet.
Yeah. But anyway, so like I was flying back from Malaysia, and I connected flight from Hong Kong to Chicago. And
that's when you were like, time to rub one out.
Yeah, I was just like, let me jerk off on this plane. I texted Jay. I was like, man, I'm about to jerk off on this fucking plane. And then he didn't get back to me. I was like, man, this is gonna be so fucking funny. And and then I like jerk off in the bathroom, and I'm like, oh my God, this is hilarious.
It's funny because for a long time I thought, I think I'm dealing with the bulk of Bill's personality externalization in the world. Now that you're telling this story, I think Jay's the one who's mostly
Yeah. Well, and when I touched down that night, I went to go do a mic, and I ate a huge dick because it wasn't that funny.
Yeah.
But then another comic invited me out to a mic the next day over in Irving Park. Natalie Joseph's mic. And
who was the comic who invited you?
dude, I am blanking on his name. It's like an Asian dude. I forgot. I'm like just blanking on his name right now.
Okay, got it.
Like we hung out like last time I was in
Chicago.
no, not last time, but like a year.
Jerry Tran? It's not Jerry Tran.
No.
Okay, got it.
No, I really can't remember his name right now. It's
Got
just
it.
like because like what was funny is he didn't even show up to that mic. But I showed
He
up,
invited you and you came and he didn't show up. That's so funny.
and then
That is such a comedian thing to do.
it's funny because I saw Tim Weisselbaum go up and this was actually fun. I saw Tim Weisselbaum go up and he used to do this thing where he would talk about how many mics he had done at that point, and it was like something like 562 or some shit like that. And he had like bombed his dick off. And I was like, wait, you could do 562 mics
and still be this shitty? Yeah, and still be this bad?
Yeah. And I mean, I love Tim Weisselbaum's comedy, but that I remember thinking like, wait, what?
I just love Tim, man. He's he's so insane.
And
I got him on the pod. We got a great episode.
But then
2 albums on Spotify now.
That's great. But then I just started going up all the time, and like law school just started diminishing in importance, and then I had the moment on Yom Kippur, where I basically the JAG officer had come to our school to basically have a showcase. Looked at my grades and stuff and was like, oh yeah, you definitely get in. There's like a dearth of people applying for JAG at that time. And I was like ready for it. I was like, okay, yeah, I'll serve my fucking country, be a fucking goddamn Marine, like, follow that cultural narrative.
Yeah, but once again, look at the identity in this situation.
But it was clear, and I like, every William Beteet had served, so I was like, I would serve my country. This would be a cool ass job.
Yeah, well, we haven't mentioned your dad, Vietnam veteran.
Yeah, dad, Vietnam veteran. My grandfather, Korean War and World War II veteran. So I was like, so to me, that was a big part of the cultural story. And I almost joined the Royal Marines in graduating. Like I was thinking about it my senior year of college.
Yeah.
Because I was just so purposeless, and I was just like, I just want something that people could respect that I was doing, and that would sound cool, like I was doing something out in the world.
Yeah.
So anyway, this sounded like cooler than working big law, and I was like, okay, let me just do this. Let me do this, right? And so we had to set up a time for me to do physical fitness exam to see if I was going to be in shape enough to do boot camp.
Yeah.
And I was in a phenomenal shape, and when he hadn't got back to me for a bit, like a few weeks. And on Yom Kippur, I was fasting, and like as it was explained to me, I realized later on that this is atypical, but I was doing the food and water fast, and it was like, you're supposed to spend the day thinking about if today was your last day alive, what would you have done differently about your life?
Well, that's heavy.
And I was like really meditating upon that. I wasn't, asking for forgiveness. I didn't know the cultural story behind it, so I was kind of appropriating Yom Kippur, I guess.
That's kind of funny. Yeah.
And but I honestly think me doing Yom Kippur every Yom Kippur makes me more Jewish than 99% of Jewish comics.
Yeah, you really do it. It's very funny to me because I remember the first time you did this, and I was like, I was like, are you Jewish, Bill? And you're like, nah.
Yeah, and that one, but when I realized, I was like, I don't want to be a Marine. I want to go to New York and do stand up after law school.
Yeah.
And once I had that realization, I texted him. I was like, hey, look, I found a job. He texted me that day. He texted me like an hour later, and I was like, I already found a job, which was a lie. And then I told my mom, I was like, hey, I turned down the thing for the like JAG on the Marines, and I also I'm gonna be a comedian. And she's like, oh my, what the fuck? Because she's heard me that summer. I was like, I think I'm gonna be a consultant, because I had studied behavioral economics that whole summer.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm gonna be a behavioral economics consultant, and now I'm gonna go into coffee shops and say how you can organize things and blah, blah. I was just like looking for something to have purpose. And I think one of the things that attracted me about stand up was that it was so the path at that point in time seemed so straightforward. You go to mics, you get better, you get famous.
Yeah.
Right? Like that was...
Well, this was the big subject of a lot of the conversations we used to have at that point.
Yeah.
Which was basically like, how do we do more mics? How do we do more time? How do we... Like, that was the whole thing.
Yeah. It was very, very rudimentary kind of understanding of the game. And what I would call the Hannibal model.
Yeah.
Like, I ran into you... So that was about, like, I think November of 2015, and I think I met you 2016.
No,
or tail end of 2015.
The first memory I have of you. So let me do two thoughts here. Let me conclude this kind of thread of us talking about when we met, which was my first memory of you was you were hosting Patsy's in Chicago, and you had on an outfit that was like the deepest V cut I've ever fucking seen. It was so deep, it was like down to Bill's navel, for Christ's sake. And then you had on like, I'm exaggerating, but then you had on like some kind of necklace with like a fur or something on it or something, and you had jeans, and you were like talking and messing with the crowd. And I remember walking in and being like, "Who is this fucking idiot?"
Yeah.
And I say this only because my first handful of memories of you, where I was like, I don't really like this guy.
Nah, I didn't like Lemon either, because I thought I actually thought, this is the funny thing about Lemon, is if you hang out with Lemon long enough and you think for the first time, you think he's actually just a pathological liar, because you think you think there's like no way one person has done all this shit. But then if you hang out with Lemon long enough, you're like, oh no, Lemon actually has done everything, and he just is very specific about them. But you had kind of a standoffish enemy, like a posturing kind of. We just didn't like each other at first.
Well, yeah, and
you reminded me of Miles Hendricks, who I still don't like.
I love Miles. I'm sad you don't like him.
Well, this is the problem I have with Miles, and I often talk shade on your podcast, and I will never stop. One of the things that I don't like about Miles is he's really not self-aware. He basically was like, yeah, the thing about Burning Man is you learn that you're supposed to like be selfless and share with people. I'm like, you're the most selfish comic I know. You only think about yourself, and I've never seen you help anybody else, you tool.
Oh my God. Yeah, I could definitely see how Miles and I have a similar. That's like, probably why I resonate with him a little bit.
Yeah, you both were like, would come in and be like.
Yeah. Well, because I had this big chip on my shoulder. All right, so let me say this. So if you guys met me in the comedy scene in 2015 in Chicago, first of all, if you had met me, the first thing you'll know is that I had been doing comedy for years before that, because I would fucking lead with that shit, whoever I spoke with.
Yeah.
I would just be like, listen, the first thing you got to understand, I've been doing this more than half my life. Like, and it was almost like so if people don't like me in the comedy scene, it's almost because they must be tired of me being like, you know, I should be further ahead. Like, that was like every conversation I had for the better part of 2 years in Chicago. And I think I finally made peace with it a little bit. But like, that was definitely my attitude.
Yeah.
And your attitude, hold on, I just want to say this real quick. And your attitude was, you were just like, I'm hitting this with 110% energy. Like, and so it was kind of like I don't give a fuck in a similar kind of way, because you were just like, I'm squaring up and doing these mics, and I'm moving on as fast as I can. I'm doing 30 mics in a week. And that was when I was just like, who does this asshole think he is? Like, I've been doing it for 16 years. Like, and you were like, yeah, but I did 30 mics this week. I had 120 minutes of stage time.
Yeah. Well, so one of the things was I was just terribly unfunny and broadcasted very hard how hard I was working at maintaining a aesthetic of not being funny.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, everybody who hated me during my Chicago, I understand it. I would show up, or I ruined mics because
you changed the culture of Chicago open mic comedy.
Yeah.
Because you would show up. I mean, I just talked to Lancey about this. Like, you would show up to mics so early. Noah fucking
Gutierrez?
Yeah, Gutierrez would call you, who produced a lot of mics in Chicago, would call you Chicago's first comic, William Beteet.
Yeah.
Because you would show up like an hour and a half early, 2 hours early to something, and just wait and just write and just hang out. Like,
yeah. It was because I would get finished with like my law school classes, and I was just like, it was like my only thing. I was like, that was just like, I was like, if I can get really good, I can like blow up. And like, this is the thing, is like, I sucked at comedy. Everybody who didn't like me back then, I didn't get it. I was just like, oh no, I was terrible. And it was that, but I thought like if I could just add enough stage time, I'd get better.
Well, I mean, and you did though, because I remember even after a while, probably a year into us doing comedy, we did a comedy show, the one at Finley Dunn's, that used to be run by that crew with Chris Trani and
Pat.
Yeah. Who's the other dude? He's a fucking agent.
Drew Korb.
Yeah, Drew Korb.
I love Drew.
Yeah, I haven't talked to him in a long time. He's a really good
guy.
Dude. Really good
Great
dude.
guy,
really
man.
good dude. Looks like Zach Levi, the actor. Anyway, so we did that show, and I remember I had a lot of people who showed up to see me, and they were talking about how funny you were, and I was like, yeah, but like.
Me.
Yeah.
The weird thing about that set was it was where I started. Here's where I don't blame people for not booking me, and everybody who doesn't get booked, the reason you're not getting booked is very easy to understand.
You're not funny.
Yeah, you're not funny, and the times you see yourself kill, number one, is not as hard as you think, and nobody saw it. And so everyone saw the 9 bombs you forgot about, so you could sustain your self-esteem and self-concept while you call yourself a comedian.
That's really funny.
But but like
everybody saw those.
Yeah, everybody saw every one of those, and they were actually worse than you thought.
Yeah.
And when I was doing that set, I did like all new material on it, and I was just like, oh, I'm just like I'm always gonna be doing new material. And so like, not only am I gonna do very inflammatory material, I'm gonna do new, not polished inflammatory material. So yeah, I get it, you know.
That's so funny, man.
But I think one of the things that was,
but you were also at the time, I think part of it was that you were also at the time dressing like you were in a SEAL video from the 1990s.
Oh yeah, well I had Adam Quaslow. This is funny. This is how Adam Quaslow changed my life. He basically told me you can't be funny and wear tight shirts, and I was like, that sounds 100% right. So I went out and bought like 8 turtlenecks and a peacoat because that's funnier. Looking like Lex Luthor.
Yeah, you were like a black Lex Luthor.
Yeah,
Lex Luthor. Pardon me. And I just remember thinking, like, a Bill out here looking like he's a super villain.
Yeah, it was like, I was like, oh, this is me now, 100%. No, that is I am Turtleneck Man now.
We were just expecting James Bond to come in like any minute.
Yeah, and but yeah, and so I went through all these things because it comes back to the same central thing, and I think a lot
identity.
of identity. And I think you have this problem too. It's just hard to represent yourself quickly.
Yeah.
And one of the things I enjoyed about writing a book with you and kind of doing bigger projects and like kind of flexing on a higher stage and being around kind of smarter people and getting other ways to get my ideas out is that I don't feel the same need to represent that I'm intelligent on stage. And because there was a point where I was like, oh, I don't think people think I'm smart enough. Let me just like do these like massively, do you think you think your relationship's real? It's actually just a game that you're playing, blah blah blah, like, you know, quasi poor Drew Michael act outs on stage.
That's funny.
But
I remember when you thought Drew Michael was the answer.
Yeah, man. He's good at comedy, man.
It's a funny motherfucker.
Yeah, I honestly, and like, shots fired, but this is my premises are amazing.
I remember you being like, my premises are better than Drew's.
Yeah, and that I will maintain my premises, and that's the only part of my comedy, because it's the only part that doesn't have to be funny.
That's this William Beteet all premise comedy. That's just a TED Talk. One of my favorite things to do when I hosted open mics was, especially with you, would be like, if I hosted Patsy's and you were the first up, I'd be like, ladies and gentlemen, get up for the spoken word poetry of William Beteet.
Oh yeah. And I mean, like, here's the thing is, like, Patsy's was really great. Just like, I think one of the things I really, and I heard in Chicago it's not the same.
No, somebody else hosts it now.
Well, no, it's just, I'm talking about like the sense of community.
Oh yeah, no. Yeah, that's changed completely.
Yeah, and I think because we've gone past Dunbar's number.
Yeah, I think a little. It might be.
Dunbar's number is like to have a
just
cohesive
Google
tribe.
it.
Yeah,
just, we'll just move. Yeah.
But yeah, and then moving to New York though, Edinburgh was a great palate cleanser from Chicago.
So like, yeah, so let's back up a little bit because we're gonna walk through this. I know this is getting really podcasty, but
no, it's great.
Yeah, it's this is a good conversation. But like, so you were, because I think that one of the things that attracts you to stand up comedy is that you can be yourself in a way that you are determining every moment of who you are in front of an audience. And I feel like specifically for you, you've dealt with this social relationship of identity in a way that a lot of people haven't had to deal with. I think I have a little bit, but not to the same level that you have. But I think that one of the things that attracts you to comedy is that you get to determine that every moment that someone is interacting or is experiencing you. And I think that that's one of the things that I can imagine maybe attracts you to comedy.
Well, one of the things that made me want to be a comic was there's an episode of Louis, the disgraced Louis, where he talked about, it was the episode with him and who's that guy who's really funny but like can't blow up because he's too fucked up?
Rick Shapiro?
No, you know I'm talking suicide episode.
Oh, you're talking about Corey Wood opened for him. Yeah, Doug Stanhope.
Doug Stanhope. And
Corey Wood opened for Doug Stanhope.
dude,
that
that's
happened.
great. That's great. Corey Wood is a really funny comic, and I think he's actually better than Doug Stanhope, and I stand by that shit.
Whoa.
Yeah. Actually, I don't know about that.
I can't wait to see Doug and say you said that.
Yeah, I mean, you probably. I don't give a fuck. Who are you?
Yeah, Doug's gonna be like, "Who the fuck is William Beteet?"
Yeah.
Doug will probably go, "I'm not funnier than anybody."
Yeah. But he was like, I thought we were in this to find truth, man. Like, Louis trying to say like, oh my God, the Tonight Show just called. I'm gonna do a set, and he's like, I thought we were in this to find truth, and I was like, oh yeah, like people laugh when shit's real. And
Yeah.
That was kind of like the first, like, I was like, oh man, I want to represent truths, and that's still the case. Like, like with a lot of my like kind of like premises and stuff.
You
like
dig
that.
really hard for him.
Yeah, and I mean like I think that
It's not just about being funny.
no, to me, and this is evident in my comedy, but I will choose.
It's definitely not about being funny with you.
Yeah, every time I will choose like trying to drop knowledge and make people feel uncomfortable with
More than be funny, more than go for a laugh. Yeah.
yeah, and it never was that more prevalent than in Edinburgh, which was a great experience. Number one, like I think our friendship, because you, me, and actually Josh with Executive Comedy, kind of just like focused that we need, because I think the opportunity cost for us was higher than other comics. Like other comics, it was like. I literally did not go to an interview where I could have got paid $160,000 a year because comedy. I was like, I have made up my mind. I'm gonna be a comic.
Yeah.
And I think with you were giving up like opportunity to quadruple your pay.
Oh, yeah.
And all these other things. And like, both of us are attractive guys who know how to date, who've been in the dating realm and dating world. And so it's just like we're giving up dates and we're giving up a life.
Time.
Yeah. And same with Josh. So when we all came together on Executive Comedy, it was kind of like, and we had all kind of was just like,
I need to have Josh on here.
Yeah, we need this to work out.
Yeah.
I just need this to work out.
Yeah, what are we doing? Something has to happen. Yeah.
And there was always a focus on the business component and not trusting, because I didn't trust. I very quickly learned the advice that I was getting from people who had been doing mics for 7 years was not the people to be getting cultural capital from.
Yeah, to listen to.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that I think has been really productive about our friendship is that I feel like we've just like with that 100 days to 365 days, is I feel like we kind of push each other a lot to do stuff that like we ended up doing Edinburgh together because basically I was doing Edinburgh and then you were like, fuck it, I'm doing it. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And like we just that's just how that happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that I mean, like I was thinking about, our mutual friend, James Altucher, and the fact that happened because we used to get together to do Undeniably Funny was like this group we came up with where we were like, we're going to make it in comedy. How are we going to do it? We like met up every Saturday for Sunday for like weeks, for weeks. And that was just one of the things is we had this challenge where like for every day we're going to email someone we don't think is going to respond to us. And then James responded to you. And
100%.
you were going to have an ask for someone we think we're going to get a no from.
Yep. 100%.
And then you asked James to be on your podcast and James said yes. And then he asked you to be on his podcast.
Yeah, that was crazy how kind of like all of that kind of began to manifest. And like here's the thing is like, I think acting predictably is the biggest problem in a lot of people's. I mean, it's my biggest problem.
Yeah, you talk about let me just say this real quick.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about this thought a lot lately because what I think you're about to say is increasing randomness.
Yeah.
And like I've been thinking about this a lot lately where you talk about increasing randomness and like I'm just going to start doing shit and see what comes back to me in the world. I think that's huge, man.
Yeah, and the thing is that we've talked about this. One of the biggest problems with a lot of women in New York who've been here, who are like maybe in their early 30s, there's a cynicism that kind of manifests.
Yeah.
And cynicism is this is where we noticed it, but it's also prevalent in comedy.
Yeah.
And what cynicism is that you pretend as if you already know the result of an action you haven't taken.
Yeah.
And
so the reason why Bill's saying this for women in New York is like there was this whole streak of time where he or I would be on a date or going on a date or something, and what we would hear back from the woman who either one of us would be going on a date with would be like, I've seen it all. blah, blah, blah. You're just like everybody. And it's like, dude, we haven't even met really.
Yeah.
And you're like already telling me how this relationship is going to go. That's the cynicism. I already know all the conclusions. I already know all the things that are going to happen.
Exactly.
And so just like we immediately started extrapolating this to comedy and work and all kinds of other shit.
Yeah, and it's really because you have to, whenever you notice that in someone else, you have to look for where you do it yourself. Right. And so like the real power in that is like and you do it tacitly, right? You don't ask you don't ask somebody like somebody to whether or not you can open for them, because you assume the answer is going to be no.
Yep.
Right. Or you just do this a lot where we were like, oh, we already assumed, and this sense of cynicism gets deeper and deeper the longer you get in the trade, because you start looking for evidence against your own interest rather than evidence for.
Yeah.
And when we had are we good?
Yeah, we're all good.
Yeah. And so when I think you and I had gone to number one, you had gone into Edinburgh and you were so kind enough to split your room with me. And that whole thing started to coalesce, and you did something that I would have never done, which is you let a lot of other people come and do another show out there. And I was like, man, that number one, I get real defensive because it's like, people are just like, you've done just so much for the scene.
Yeah.
And
I think how many clips I've given people.
Yeah. And it's just kind of, pearls before swine, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. The perennial subject matter of this podcast is shitting on the Chicago comedy scene. I feel like.
Yeah. But one of the things about Edinburgh was it was a place where, I got to do an hour, and we got to do an hour. And it was just like, oh man, like, I actually had times where I did well for a whole hour, and it definitely wasn't the usual, but it had happened.
I mean, you had highs in Edinburgh that were. I mean, this goes back to the thing that I would, people would criticize you maybe in the Chicago comedy scene. I remember saying it was the same thing I would defend you with in Chicago that then I saw in Edinburgh, which I was like, dude, Bill just hits notes that other people don't hit. And whether or not they strike true and people like it, he's hitting notes that people are responding to. And so it'd be crazy because we go to Edinburgh and you could get a standing ovation from a packed room of people. And this is 100% true. A dude came out and saw Bill's show, then had his brother fly in from Ireland to come and see Bill's show. The same dude saw it twice, called his brother, said, you got to come and see this guy's show. And then had people come out. I mean, Bill you hit highs that were higher than I think anybody else who were in Chicago hit. I mean, anybody else who came out from Chicago that year to hit at the comedy show.
Thank you so much. And I also had a lower low.
You had pretty low lows.
Yeah, if you Google past the 6th page of me, there's a review of me that begins with William Beteet.
No matter what William Beteet, no matter how William Beteet ends this joke,
it's never okay to beat your wife unless.
Yeah. that I almost, when I read that, I almost printed it out and put it on a plaque and sent it to you.
Yeah, and it was, it was kind of it was cool. It was but one of the things that Edinburgh kind of really did was, being back in the UK and just having experiences when I got to London and just in Edinburgh and just feeling attractive again. Cause I think one of the things that comedy can damage your self-esteem.
Oh, without a doubt.
And, in a way in which that's kind of imperceptible, but your soul takes it. You're not supposed to take that much confirmation that you're not supposed to be doing what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's constant disconfirmation.
Yeah.
You're constantly failing all the time.
And kind of I had lots of suicidal ideations before I left. I wrote my hour was about suicide, and I was like, oh, it's just because I'm creative. No, I was horribly depressed. And so moving to New York, and this is one of the things that I loved about New York. New York finished me in a way in which Chicago would never have.
Yeah.
And I got to do things. I mean, I almost had 3 shows get picked up here. You know what I'm saying? With 2 that were mine, and then 1 I was in a pilot that got picked up by CNBC. So there were things that happened. It's just all of them just didn't happen,
Yeah.
And I
well, that's the big thing that I keep getting as I get older is most projects. So the unfortunate truth is that most projects don't work out.
Yeah.
That but it's the doing. But part of it is the doing of it. And it's you're doing this for reasons. Some things work out, but you have to accept that most projects don't work out. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do them.
Yeah, well, the thing is this, and this is kind of why I made the movement to self-help stuff, is because projects aren't assets. And I had to realize, like, what did I really want a career as a stand-up comic, or did I really want the freedom that I just thought would naturally come with being a comedian? And I was just like, oh, I want to basically build something that I can profit off of, that isn't that it can't be scrapped by somebody being like, yeah, we're going to take this in a different direction, or that needs a conspiracy number of 40 people.
Yeah.
And like
you wanted to start to rely on things that you could produce yourself.
Exactly. And like, this is the thing, this is what we realized, was like, people are broke. Like, the companies, these television companies, don't have money. And
so that was a big, so for the listener who's listened to this whole episode, we went to MIPCOM, like we had mentioned a fucking hour ago or more, and that was a big takeaway, was you were like, dude, none of these companies have any goddamn money. And you can see it yourself, man. You can go online, check out, speaking of Tom Takar, go watch Tom Takar's clip on YouTube from Comedy Central Presents, or Comedy Central's whatever, Comedy Central Stand Up. Like they did like a premium blend type thing where Tom Takar was on it. Tom's hilarious, but his clip on Comedy Central has, like, I don't know, 60,000 views. And you're like, dude, there are people who have millions of views who post their own shit, have no brand.
Nothing.
No,
they're not even in the city. Who's the guy in Chicago that was posting clips recently that every one of them was blown up?
There was Joe Kilgallen.
Kilgallen.
Yeah.
I mean, we were talking about.
I got 13,000 on my most recent clip that I posted. It's like 20% of the way to Tom's situation.
Well, I mean, and that's more than most Conan clips that have come out in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And so I moved here when the power dynamic
was starting to shift.
It had started to shift before that.
Yeah.
But it was surfacing.
I mean, just think about it. We got into the Funny Planet pilot got into New York Television Festival. That was the last New York Television Festival.
And
I think.
How many before that? They had like 20 years?
Oh, yeah. They were running for a long time. They didn't do it last year.
Yeah.
And I think it's because everybody in the industry, the writing is on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people are losing. So we go to MIPCOM. We start talking to all these different outlets. Dude, nobody has money.
Nobody has money. They're trying to get banks to invest in stuff. Now, you can't show them a good business plan because streaming service fucks up business plans.
Yeah, you have no data.
No.
Netflix has the data. Amazon has the data. You don't have the data.
Not only that, well, with traditional TV, you can be like, well, you can market it to this audience or you're trying to get in your blah, 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 and you can use these kind of advertisers, whereas streaming doesn't have advertising.
Yeah.
Not only that, this is the big difference. For anybody who's writing a television pilot, I'm going to give you the game, is that it cost close to $1 million or $2 million to make a television series, and streaming services are only buying completed series. So the ask for a television show is a $2 million ask, where it used to be a $30,000 ask
just for the pilot,
because they would run the pilot, ratings good, then people will fuck with it.
Yeah.
And so it's a completely different ask. So I think that the movement that a lot of people should make, if you're trying to get something, is towards movies. Because movies, number one, there's a lot more distribution methods that don't just exist within the streaming platform. So you can distribute it. There's all sorts of different ways you can distribute a movie, and it's way easier to get funding. The movie can, if you shoot it on a budget, $90,000, and it can still look really good. And it's a lot more straightforward on how you can go about that process, and you can probably get a lot more cameos.
Yeah, it's been the industry's been changing so much, man. It's been fascinating to me because I feel like it's like the Wild West a little bit. Like, what's going to happen is been. But anyway, the point I guess we were going toward is that, like, we learned basically these guys don't have any goddamn money.
No, not only
a big thing also, just to mention it, because before we move on, is branded content is like really big. Like that's been going and approaching brands directly. But that's like even bizarre because it's like we're going to go talk to, Funny Planet. We talked to Airbnb, and we talked to TripAdvisor. And we talked to like all these different brands to be like, yeah, we want to produce this series in conjunction with you guys. But I don't know. There's something about it where it's like you're working directly with this company that's giving you money. It almost compromises your creative vision in many different ways.
Well, the thing is that I kind of like realize is like, and through this entire experience and through our other friends, kind of more success is like you should go there with way less. the less you have, because you basically want them to paint what they want
onto the situation.
Onto the situation.
You want to be an open canvas and have them see what they want to see. And if you have too much vision, people talk about vision a lot, but it's like if you have too much vision, too specific or detailed of a vision, it's
number one, they can't feel important. So like that was what happened. So I wrote
they can't invest in it because you've already completed the idea.
Exactly. I wrote a show called Crypto.comedy with James Altucher, and this is at the time he had hundreds of millions of dollars of advertising behind him, and like basically it was like a really big point. And Amblin liked the script, but they were like, we want a named writer on this. So they were gonna bump him off, get rid of the idea. and then rewrite something, and I was just not going to be a part of it. And that somebody was trying to broker a deal with us in Apple TV, but then this producer guy just kept trying to change things so he could get a co-writer. So you have this thing where people are trying to weasel their way into
the same. Yeah, if there's any momentum behind your project.
Yeah, and so
I mean, the same thing was happening with Funny Planet. Like we had a handful of different studios that I won't mention. Kept saying to us, they were like, "Yeah, we'll sign you. We want to produce your pilot. Send us your footage. We'll start editing it. We're going to put it together in these different kinds of ways." And, me and Zach and Brendan were all like, I don't know if we should do this because this feels a little odd. Meanwhile, this studio, just for the listener, if you think this sounds shady and you're like, I don't know if I would do that, they have a really highly rated show on Netflix. And you've probably watched it. And so we're like, this is a great studio that we're going to work with. It's going to be amazing. Later, we get some news that these people are like the same people we were talking to get like busted for all these like ethical things in Variety magazine. And we're like, it's fucking weird, man. Like they're just they would probably taken our footage, repurposed it, cut us out completely, taken our footage, gone to somebody else, given the idea, changed it completely again, and then they would have like thrown other people onto it.
1,000,000%. And
because we threw the money on to get the original footage. That's the only thing they wanted. The raw footage to change it up, to pitch it to different people.
100%. And here's the thing that a lot of times they count on is that you can't afford an IP attorney.
No, there's no fucking way. It's so expensive.
So, like to take that to litigate out, because they'd litigate it out. You know what I'm saying? So, because, you're not, so a lot of times you're getting in this place of dens, and like if you want to get a TV show made, you have to understand about tax rebates. You're gonna have to understand about different studios getting involved. Yep. There's so many processes that are going about that we were not privy to back when we're sitting around as a writing exercise. Like, hey, like let's write a pilot. Like, in Chicago, you're like thinking like this thing's run on ideas, and it's like no, it's run on capital.
Now we're sitting in Cannes in the Palais Royal in Cannes, France, listening to a lecture about how you can take advantage of different tax rebates all over the world, basically, to shoot how you can shoot in Atlanta and Vancouver and Israel and get all of these monies, sent back to you or whatever. And it's like, that's the shit you actually got to know.
100%. And they don't teach it at Tisch, because I have friends who go to Tisch and they're like, wait, what? And this is the thing, is because the game is hidden from people who are academics. Or a lot of times what they'll do is, let's say you have 4 million followers or something, and that they can put some real gas behind you. They hide that part of the process of them asking for money from you even. So you don't know it. You assume that they write the check, but they're actually asking for money from several other sources. So learning about all of this stuff in here, opening for Bill Burr, doing podcasts and serious, I realized like, oh, I've done like really cool stuff, but none of this is becoming money. Right.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah. Damn it.
Yeah. And like, I was in the crypto space. That was cool. Made money off of that. But like, I was like, within stand up itself, I was just like, there was still a huge question mark. And so then that's kind of where we're at right now, where it's like, after all of that, after kind of just seeing a lot of projects get pew-pewed for no reason, or that like, people not getting paid, or things taking a really long time, or people's projects getting taken apart 4 years after they were approved and written about in the Atlantic. And I was just like, I'm not betting my life on something that inconsistent for people who don't even have power anymore. And the thing is that people are using a dated metric on how to succeed a lot of times, which is what I'll call like a dated manual. Like you're using an old map. You're using a map.
A map that worked 30 years ago.
30 years ago. And like that's not the case anymore. But the emblems are still the same. And we've talked to you about this before, where a lot of comics are concentrated on feeling like a comedian rather than being a comedian. And there's two different things. Feeling like a comedian is going up every night and performing at shows. Being a comedian is writing that shit on your taxes.
Yeah.
You know, and the thing is that the line is no longer that straightforward. And so, yeah.
I think that I don't know, man. I mean, this is a shifting world. So it feels like, we've run the gamut in all kinds of subjects and gone off the rails a number of times. But I guess I just getting back to this, it's like, it feels like, you've with the masterclass you've been working on in the last year, it feels like you said this quote. I've repeated it to a few people. You should live in New York when you know why you're living in New York. You should not live in New York if you do not know why you're living in New York.
Exactly. And it can happen where you know why you're here when you come here, and then you get all these other things that happen, and you're like, oh, I don't need to be here right now. Let me come back here because rent's too expensive. Like, one of the big decision thing was like 1 month of rent here was 3 months in Cannes, or 3 months in Nice, and 3 months in Paris.
Yeah.
Right. Or 2 months in Paris or whatever. And so when I basically went with the Frame Control Masterclass, which, comedy people, it's just like persuasion shit. It really, I just like got awoke to the affiliate world and digital marketing and all this other stuff. And it's just like, oh, wow, you can make a lot of money and just not be asking people for stage time.
Yeah.
But like when I made that transition, it was like, this is the hardest thing I think for a lot of comics do, because when you make decisions away from comedy, everyone's so aware that you're not doing shit in comedy.
Yep.
Right. So like
and it's hard because your whole identity is built around it.
Yeah, and like that's how people kind of know you, and that's kind of how you know yourself. And so when I made these decisions to basically focus on like shooting a product and like the RSD pickup artist community and all this other crap. Like, it's like these things have no currency in comedy. And like one of the problems sometimes you and I have this too is we have a lot of things that are currency to people in conversations that aren't comedy, but in comedy conversations we don't have the same level.
Oh
of
yeah,
currency.
like none. Yeah.
And comedy is such a cult that the reason all cultures are all cultures are normalized cults. Right, but the thing about comedy is a cult. Like, there are certain emblems that mean something, and certain emblems that mean fucking nothing.
It's gonna be. I mean, I could have a whole career doing stand up. You know what I mean, and make a ton of money, and I'll still be angry that I didn't get CYSK.
1,000,000%. Like, and not with CYSK for me, but like maybe like Jimmy Fallon.
Yeah, or whatever. Yeah, whatever. Colbert, Fallon, name it another place.
Yeah, like it's like those kind of things where it's like, oh, and the thing is that when you're speaking to people about what you've done in the past year, if it just isn't comedy, you could have made all the money in the world. If it's not comedy, it doesn't have relevance. Yeah, and that's kind of one of the hard things, is because you kind of abstract yourself out of this hierarchy system, which actually makes you less funny. The hierarchy of comedy makes you less funny because, number one, just the way your hormones work, you release cortisol when you feel like you're low status, and you release less testosterone. And so when you think you're at the bottom of a hierarchy, you're just going to perform less well. Yeah. And that's one of the best things about being in New York. It's such a big goddamn scene that there's no scene.
It doesn't matter what you do.
It doesn't fucking matter.
It's kind of crazy, man, because it's like it doesn't matter what you do in the sense that, like, I mean, it matters what you do because you don't know who's going to be in the audience, but like it doesn't matter what you do in the sense that you're like, I'm never going to run into these people again, mostly.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Even if those people are in the audience, I remember when Big J said I was funny, Josh and I did the roast battle and all this other crap, and then there was like it was filled with agents there that night. And not one goddamn one of them talked to me. And we got compliments from like really great comedians, and they said that we were like really good. And they just like walked by me and Josh. And Josh is a completely marketable guy. I'm a marketable guy.
Super marketable, yeah.
And
Josh has been on Netflix.
Yeah, but and like the thing is that we have like credits and stuff like that. But the thing is that like it actually doesn't matter who's in the fucking room. Yeah. It matters whether or not you have clout. And I think that
or whether one of those guys in the audience happens to have something they can put you in right now.
Right now. And if you have kind of like a weird looking aesthetic, like I realized early on, like I'm never going to win the Indian guy thing. Like, I love Vic. Vic is always going to get cast as an Indian guy before me. Yeah.
Vic Pandya.
Yeah. And I'm never going to win the black guy thing. Nick Ogle's going to get cast. We need a black lawyer guy, or, like that. Yeah. So the thing is that I just learned early on, you and I have the same problem. We're niggas who don't get picked. Yeah, and that is
technically, Bill. I'm a cracker who doesn't get picked.
I don't see color. Yeah, it's like we are kind of people who have to create our own space to do things. And that's kind of like, well, I was like, all right, let me make these fucking digital assets. You've done the same thing. You're making money non-locally. And it's just kind of like, why kind of subjugate yourself to a system that there's such a glut of individuals that you cannot be valued appropriately. So the thing is that happens that a lot of people don't realize. So a lot of there's a lot of blogists and people talking about why is it when women have more access to men than ever and more choice than ever with dating apps, to the highest quality men that they've ever had, as much choice as ever, that women are the least happy with relationships that they've ever been. And that's because we actually don't want choice. That's why authoritarian regimes are the kind of norm now, and they're resurfacing, is because people
don't want to have to take that responsibility.
They don't want to take that responsibility, but also the more options we have, the more irrational our decisions become.
I mean, that's what dating in New York is.
Yeah, because you cannot come up with an active measure of quantifying it, right? And and the same goes with comedic talent. Now that we're kind of busting out of a space where, I mean, in New York, if you get a Comedy Central thing or Jimmy Fallon, it doesn't mean as much as it used to even 3-4 years ago. Yeah. So that like even the kind of the accreditation system is kind of deteriorating.
It's breaking down.
And that's kind of like a diatribe or whatever. But
I think what the underlying point of what you're saying is that there's an open kind of field to run in this kind of way.
Yeah, that's why I'm coming out with my TikTok channel and my YouTube channel. I'm dead serious, and I'm talking about like why white supremacists are white supremacists, like why all this other stuff, because I realized that the real value comes from talking about these issues in a real polished way. And if I can get the clout first, then I can get the stage time, and then I can get better. Because like, there's a point in which where mics actually just make you worse, because you
need a lot of time.
And it's not even time. It's just like, number one, you have to put a value proposition on your time, right? And if you're running all over town, you're a very advanced person, right? In terms of making money. Yeah. And you running around town for 2 to 3 hours trying to get up for 5 minutes is just actually a
waste of time.
And then you take
the ROI is really bad.
On top of that, you might be, getting wrong information. Like, people think they're like getting information on whether or not something's funny. I've had it where jokes that people did not laugh at, like I've screamed about on this podcast before, and then I go in a real audience and they laugh.
Well, I think a great example of that is I did Brendan Gay's show at the Bowery Electric.
Murdered.
Yeah, murdered. And a lot of that
did
material
better than a Daily Show guy.
Yeah, than the dude on a Daily Show. And he knows who he is. Yeah. And anyway, I did all that tall people material. None of that I done that at open mics all over the place. And in Chicago and New York, doesn't do well ever. And then I get up at that show, crushes so hard. It's just there's a qualitative difference in the quality of the audiences you're doing something to.
100%. And so
and it doesn't mean that open mics are bad, period, full stop. But like, basing your ability to get better on those is just not going to happen.
They have a ceiling that happens actually a lot quicker than a lot of people assume.
Well, it's like when we were doing the whole comedy. I remember, when you were like doing the year-long thing and I was doing the 100 days. 6 weeks in, I think we were like, we're not getting any better anymore.
No, I got worse throughout that year. Like I got to a point where I was worse than like 6 months in. Yeah, and I was heartbroken and destroyed, and like I just was like by the end of it, I was just like shell shocked. And but like what I would say is this is like my primary focus for next year, since I built like ways to make money, is now just clout. Yeah, just clout, and I'm gonna reverse engineer everything, which I thought was going to just happen because I was gonna be good enough at comedy. And what you realize is the commodity isn't your comedy, and your commodity isn't even your marketability. Your commodity is what you are at that moment and whether they can fan those flames to be something more. And I honestly don't think they can fan the flames even anymore. What show does everybody watch?
I can't. I have no idea.
There's like, where are you gonna put me that I'm gonna where
Pornhub,
right? Exactly. But like, I could get on the For You page of TikTok, and then all of a sudden I can get like 30 million views, which is more people than watch Grey's Anatomy. Yeah. So you just take a look. Like, there's access. There's so much more access than there used to be, and you just need to not fall into the social prisons, but you will, because we all get sucked into the cultural machine.
Yeah. Well, and that's what your book's going to be about, basically. Is reverse. I mean, I don't want to say reverse engineering, but dismantling the cultural memes and the cultural frames that you don't realize are driving your ship.
Yeah, and and this is, and if we could just talk about this, I know you're getting tired, but I just want to talk about the Power Bible.
Yeah, go ahead, man, do it.
Is like, so the Power Bible was really I think when we wrote that, it kind of changed how I viewed myself, because I didn't think I was actually able to produce something that good. It's actually a really amazing book, and I think out of all the things that have happened in my life, from giving the commencement address at my high school when they wanted to expel me, to like fucking, like Time
What a wild
Magazine.
life, man.
Yeah, it's like all these crazy things that have happened to me. Bill Burr, the Power Bible, to me, even with zero validation, proved to me something about myself that I thought was not true, and it proved me wrong, and it also proved me right. And so in that's at its core a self-help book.
Yeah.
And there have been points where you've had to dial me back from making it into kind of a academic exploration into some of these ideas, even though there's philosophical concepts that permeate the text.
Yep.
And with the Holocron, which is the one about the transcendence of culture, tribalism, and identity, that is going to be not so much as a manual, but kind of an exploration similar to Joseph Campbell or like, Carl Jung, where I really want to basically kind of make a philosophical stance about the metaphysics and how our identity operates interpersonally, and also internally, and how we experience those things. And so I think number one, I want to thank you for kind of embarking on this process with me, which kind of gave me the self-esteem, because a lot of times we will have an idea that we might have a talent for, but we don't have the skill there. And that the point of having a tribe or a community of individuals is to basically have your community take you places that you wouldn't have gone on your own.
Yeah.
And I think that the Power Bible was that for me. Actually, not I think, I know. And so, like, moving forward, it's going to be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I feel like that came out of I think us really being. I was like, we just gotta fucking put down in words a lot of the stuff we really are talking about all the time.
Yeah, and because we started off with the dating thing book, and it just was like going really well, like the themes of dating and sales, which never ended up being anything. We have a manuscript; it's like 60 pages.
It's like 60 pages, and isn't anything yet.
And then like the thing about the Power Bible was like that book's probably like the original manuscript, probably like 450
pages, man. It's super long.
Yeah,
and had to cut so much of it out and to dial it down to like its most important bits.
And there's a thing that's redemptive. The thing that's what's interesting about stand-up that we kind of is like there's such we get validation so quickly for our process, right? You get, oh, like fucking the joke worked. And it really kind of fucks you up when you're working on something as big as a book. Yeah. Because you want validation.
Yeah. I mean, James still has a manuscript, man. He might get back and be like, guys, this isn't very good.
I mean, he's already read half of it and he's blown away. And
I just the amount it has been so satisfying to me to send that manuscript over to different people and have them get back to me right away and be like, this is fucking amazing.
Yeah.
And like, how did you guys do this?
Exactly. And it was like,
and I'm like, multiple decades of near insanity.
Yeah. I mean, and but like to me, so like working on these massive kind of undertakings and building these products out that are kind of like one of the big. So I'm like famous on Quora, which is like saying I'm a minister in Turkmenistan. It just like has no like I have 71,000 followers. Like I was like more famous than Jabuki whenever he was blowing up on his Twitter thing. I had like so many viral things and like but it has no currency in comedy, which is so painful.
Translate to literally anything else.
It's like having a passport that doesn't get you access to
I'm just about to watch you do this on TikTok a second time.
Yeah. Right? Just get like 8 million followers and they're all girls that I can never have sex with. You just gotta wait 3 years. Oh
my god, that's so funny.
But with my core following is like there's so many people who really like my self-development stuff. I'm way better at helping people than I am at being funny, and that bothered me for so long. Where it was just like there was like
just so the listeners aware, Bill has fans who literally flew out to Scotland to watch him do comedy from his Cora.
Yeah, and like it's crazy, and like I'm able to leverage so much more opportunity from this. I spent like a lot of time building my self-development kind of skills, and so to go back to that and be like, oh, let me just profit off of this. Why am I building up this like I need to only profit from comedy or Bitcoin? Weirdly, you know, and yeah, it's just like when I look at the Power Bible, it was like, oh man, like this was just really it was just really, it was like a spirit. I think a lot of times you need to prove to yourself something, and I think a lot of times we're sad because we don't undertake anything big enough.
Yeah.
And I think the cool thing about writing a book like that was a massive undertaking that's taken way longer than we've wanted it to. But then you take a look at the fact that we've done what a publishing company takes 3 fucking years to do
in a year.
Yeah. And like, honestly, it could already be done if like, you know, like other people had moved on other stuff faster.
That's true.
And so it's like, you know, and it's great. And we've gotten like amazing feedback, and it's exactly the book we wanted to write.
Yeah.
And I think that is really, I think if there's been anything, this has been the greatest year of my life in terms of things I've done that made me proud. I've passed the bar, done all this other stuff. And even though like in comedy I kind of taken a back seat, it's like just complete things. Like there's like nothing that does more.
Just do cool shit, man.
Yeah.
Just work on cool shit. Try to do something cool.
And
like,
don't worry if it works.
Yeah, don't worry if it's because it's not gonna.
Yeah.
The more projects don't work out than work out.
Yeah.
And like I just internalize that. It doesn't mean don't do it. It means do it and be cool with yourself. Make it into something.
Well, and also here's the thing is that the reason why a lot of early projects don't work out is because you want to get validation too quickly.
That's we've had a lot of talk about. This is a bigger idea than we have time to explore in the remaining time of this podcast.
But I do want to get this part
Yeah,
out.
go ahead.
Is that there is a level of polish that something takes to be profitable that a lot of times we don't even have an awareness of because we get so wrapped up in like, oh, the fact that we did it is such a surprise.
Yeah.
But when you and I have done enough projects to just like kind of have, and honestly, you just being like it needs more. It needs to be more refined or whatever like this. And because there's a way that you act with a finished product that once you've like deprived yourself of the validation, but you know something is actually fucking amazing, you interact with that piece of work differently than you would something that maybe you came out with just a little bit too early. You won't send it out to as many people. You won't be as bold or forthcoming to make people read it or in its value. And I think that's a really valuable thing.
It's got to be lean. It's got to be dangerous. It's got to be. You look at like this is gonna sound insane to anybody listening to this podcast, but it's like you look at a fucking. I got this knife, K-bar knife that I bought when I was like younger. Right, it's like a Marine Corps knife. There is not an ounce of fat on that knife. It is a handle and it's a blade, and that's it. And like that, anything that you do needs to get in this position where it is just you can't take anything else away and have it be the same thing.
Yep.
If there is anything there that you can take away and it's still the same thing, then take it away.
Exactly.
And that's the point that I had to get. And I was serious about this with the Power Bible.
Oh, I mean, dude, we recorded the audiobook and then cut out what probably turned out to be like 70 pages because like in the final thing, right? Because that was 50 pages off the manuscript, which is different than the edited version of that made it into the book. And and I with the frame control product, I shot that bitch 5 times. Yeah, you know, like so I ended up having to fly out to a mansion in fucking California because the people at RSD were like, dude, this is really good, but this is kind of shit quality, you know, and but basically having that level of standard where you're like, oh, I need to keep doing this again and again, like counting on the first time just not being good enough. Yeah, and the thing that's kind of like that was like a really interesting experience.
I just think it. So I mean, just to draw this back to the listeners, like if you're getting anything from this podcast, it's like your everything, your life, yourself, everything you do is going to go through a whole bunch of different levels of being in different ways, and you're going to evolve, and you're going to change, and you're going to be in different things. And it doesn't mean don't do projects, but like just accept the fact that it's like, man, this is not going to be what it is in the end is not what it was when you started. And that's fine. That's all part of the journey. And like, don't be afraid to like get into that space, but also accept that it's probably not going to be what it is. And don't have this notion that it has to be this exact thing and it has to happen this exact way.
Well, yeah, a lot of times what happens is, and I call this basically when you consume a lot, you actually have, and this is the Ira Glass thing, you have like really high taste, but your vision of what you can produce does not match your talent.
Yeah.
It's just your vision, and that's the problem is that you have a vision, but you have no idea how the fuck that vision got put together because you didn't understand that vision was put together of like $8,000 camera, 7 different audio guys, a fucking food bed in the back. Like there's so much that's happening to create the experience that you are looking at through your vision.
Yeah.
Like the ability to direct people, the talent of the people involved. And a lot of people make plans that don't consider the resources of talent that are around them or that they have access to or have the ability to pay. And here's the thing, sometimes you shouldn't pay the best talent because they don't give a fuck about your project.
Yeah.
Like
oh my God, dude, you dealt with that so much.
Yeah, it's just like you want to just get somebody who is within your spectrum of can still give a shit.
Yeah.
Because like if you get the best guy and they don't give a fuck, it's the worst.
This is why we were talking about conspiracy number earlier.
Yep.
It's because it's like the more people you have to depend on, the more problems you're gonna have.
Yep. And one of the things you have to understand is in friendships and stuff like that is you're going to see a different side of people when you're working with them in a capacity with stakes. And so when you got to just always be aware, like, oh, you guys get along as friends, but now there's stakes. And now you have to see like, oh, if they're freaking out on something small, you can't go deeper. Right. And because these are the things that you have to kind of do, because some people, when stakes are involved, the personality is going to change. And so what you have to do is kind of figure out what is your working relationship when there's stakes involved, leveraging into that. There's all these things that kind of happen. What happens with you in these situations? What are your impulses? And it's really a purifying experience to create something from start to finish. And the resistance that you have are the resistance to changing yourself, because you're going to have to be unlike yourself.
You're going to have to be a different person when you finish it than you did when you began it.
Dude, we recorded the audiobook. I had to re-record my entire goddamn section of the audiobook because I sounded like Lenny from Mice and Men because I have dyslexia. And it's not because it wasn't passable. It was that Brendan is really good at voiceover work. So the difference between Brendan and I's performance on the audiobook would have created an effect where people would have. I have long monologues in the book where people would just not like those monologues. So I had to go through and re-record
the whole thing,
the whole fucking thing. And that's something that you're not gonna do. You're not gonna consider doing if you're like, oh yeah, it's just gonna work out. Most things don't work out for that reason. That people are like, no, I'm sure it's gonna be fine. If I'm sure it's gonna be fine. If you're saying that more than a couple times, you need to if you want to make money off the thing, you need to redo it.
Yeah.
You need to fucking just redo it.
Yeah, it's probably going to be all right.
Yeah. That said every person who never made money off their shit.
Yeah.
This has been a lot.
This has been a lot. Where can people follow you, Bill?
I mean, just don't.
Just buy the goddamn. Join the community.
Yeah.
Buy the masterclass. It'll be linked in the show notes.
Yeah.
You'll probably be in France by the time this comes out. Actually,
most definitely.
Well, I'm gonna miss you, man. I'll have to go over there and visit. And everybody should obviously follow the Lazy Philosopher.
And if you've listened to me on earlier versions of Brendan's podcast, or if you record the Trump episode below, you can see how much my voice has changed. And then if you want to purchase my voice course.
You got the voice course, you got the discipline course, you got the master class.
Dude, I'm fucking I'm pimping this ass. You know.
Oh man, Bill.
That's the thing about comedy. You're trying to pimp yourself and nobody wants it. Ever try to pimp your ass?
It's
for free
sad.
And
it's
still
so
get
sad
nothing?
too, because you're the iceberg slim of your own brain.
Yeah. Oh
so
my
you're
God.
just like, I'm beating myself with a hanger every night.
Oh my
Why
God.
ain't you funny, you bitch?
100. How many times, man? Just trying to get funny. Like, you know, this is the weird thing. Is it's like I think it's harder to be funny on stage if you're funny in real life. I think I've shared this thought on the podcast before.
Yeah.
But yeah, man. I think you're really funny in both places.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Well, Bill, it's been great, man. We'll have you back on here when you get kicked out of France.
Yeah, right. Like Brexit. Like they're like, yeah, dude, your British passport actually. Boris Johnson drafted even a worse deal.
Oh God, that guy.
Yeah.
All right, man. Thank you so much for being on. I'll link everything in the show notes. It's been a long-ass episode, but meanwhile, the madness continues. Peace. Thanks so much for listening to the Madness Continues podcast. Once again, this is Brendan Lemon. If you liked what you listened to, please take a minute to to subscribe, to give us a rating. It really does mean a difference. I say us like there's more than one person doing this. It's just me, everybody, so every little bit of support you can lend would be really appreciated by me. If you want to share this podcast, it would really, really, really mean a lot to me. I hope you come back. I hope you listen and check out the other podcast I produce, Funny Planet, where we talk to different comedians from all over the world about what they're doing and how they are funny in their own cultures. You can learn a thing or two and you'll have a laugh too. Anyway, take care. Take it easy. We'll see you here next time.